All right, guys, welcome to Press X Podcast, episode 137. Thank you all for being here with me and waiting patiently as always while the intro credits roll. Always very, very nice to see people arriving so early, kind of hanging out, kind of chatting a little bit. So I appreciate that. Right off the bat here, we have a $5 super chat from PlayStation Pete. And he says, could Microsoft put PlayStation out of business? No. I mean, look, we know that we know Microsoft, when it comes to the amount of money they have, endless funds that they can do whatever they want with, but they'll never be able to put PlayStation out of business. Only PlayStation could do that to themselves. I mean, if you think about what PlayStation is, they make video games. Yes, PlayStation is a platform. Yes, PlayStation is a console. But if you think about what it all comes down to at the end of the day, PlayStation it's about video games, you know? So Microsoft could never put PlayStation out of business. The only way something like that would ever happen is if Sony did something absolutely insane to themselves and they almost did that, you know? I mean, if you look at the PlayStation 3 generation, you could argue that Sony almost put themselves out of business, right? At least in gaming. And no one else had anything to do with that except Sony. I mean, you know, obviously Microsoft, they did well with the 360, but you know, Sony was their own worst enemy. So we have Sir Speaks a Lot with a $5 super chat. Thank you, man. You're saying, very interesting, Sir Speaks a Lot, that you bring this up. You're saying my birthday is on October 3rd. Can you finally give me those feet pics I've been asking for since 2020, MBG? I know you remember me asking. You can't hide from me. Well, Sir Speaks a Lot. First of all, no. Second of all, you're right. I probably can't hide from you, but the good news is I'm not trying to hide from you, Sir Speaks a Lot. So you should take some solace in that fact. I think it would be concerning if I was trying to hide from you. But, you know, never say never. I'm a believer in that. I'm a believer in never say never. Anything is possible. And I don't say that to you to give you necessarily some kind of hope. But, you know, we'll just leave it at that. But you mentioned your birthday. You know, my birthday is coming up, actually, in just a couple of days. My birthday is on September 30th. And I will be 29 years old. So I'm getting old. September 30th is my birthday. And a couple of days after that, just on October 4th, that's actually my wife's birthday. So, yeah, a lot of birthdays coming up. But Sir Speaks a Lot, I know you pretty well at this point, and one thing I know is I can expect these types of super chats for the foreseeable future. You'll never give up. You'll never give up. And I respect that to a degree. You know? So thank you guys for those super chats. All right, so we have actually quite a few different topics to discuss over the course of this podcast episode today. I'm going to give you a quick rundown of the topics I plan to discuss, and I hope to keep things on track over the course of this episode today. So before I give you that rundown, I also want to inform everybody a couple of ways you can help support the podcast and support my channel here if that's something you want to do. First of all, just being here, hanging out with me, watching the content. I always say that's the easiest way for you to show your support. Without people watching the content, there would be no reason for me to make the content. So just keep engaged with the content, keep watching. Hitting the like button, that helps a lot. YouTube's algorithm, the way it works is the more likes a video or a stream gets, the more likely the algorithm is to pick up your content and put it out there in front of new viewers. So anytime you hit the like button, you're basically helping grow the community. If you want to go above and beyond, though, like we see PlayStation Pete and Sir Speaks a Lot doing here, as well as many others, feel free to donate a super chat. I literally couldn't do what I do here on a weekly basis without your continued support week over week with the super chats on the podcasts or with any other stream I do. Another thing you can do if you want to go above and beyond is become a channel member. So a big shout out to all of my channel members. You do get a couple of benefits, but the main reason people become channel members is to just support me month over month and kind of show that support. So those are some ways you can help support not only Press X podcast, but help support my channel as well. So again, a big thank you to everybody who does that. And a big thank you to all of my viewers. Now, to let you guys know some of the topics that we are going to discuss today, we're going to be talking about what I've been playing. Again, this is something I want to try to incorporate a little bit more month over month, week over week. So I'm going to talk about that. I have a couple of things I want to discuss when it comes to what I've been playing, what I'm going to play next. We're going to be talking about a new PS5 model that is being rumored, and it's apparently set to come out September of next year. So basically this time next year. And there's definitely some interesting stuff we can gather from this because apparently it's going to have a detachable disk drive. We're going to talk about some interesting comments made by Sony's Shuhei Yoshida, how, in the face of uncertainty, I guess you could say, when it comes to the future of certain business models in the gaming industry, Sony is still taking a firm stance, doubling down on premium game releases. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the fact that Shuhei Yoshida revealed that Jim Ryan is apparently the person who is responsible for Sony's more aggressive push with indie games with the start of the PlayStation 5 generation, which I think comes as kind of a surprise. We're going to talk more about, unfortunately, the Microsoft Activision Blizzard acquisition because another week, we have another comment. This time it's coming from Microsoft CEO, so I want to dive a little bit into that. We're going to talk about PlayStation VR2. I just want to talk about this upcoming piece of hardware in general because I feel like I haven't talked about it a lot, and frankly, I don't see that many people talking about it. I think it's kind of understandable because of the way Sony's kind of handling the marketing, but it does seem like the marketing is slowly but surely beginning to ramp up. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a PlayStation studio, that being XDev, kind of flexing this past week by revealing that they are actually co-developing Rise of the Ronin with Team Ninja. So very interesting. I think that gives us a little bit of insight into why that was revealed the way it was. We're also talking about Final Fantasy 16 and how we have official confirmation, or as official as it's going to get, that we are getting a new trailer next month. And this could have some greater implications depending on how you view it. And we are going to talk a little bit more about the GTA 6 leak because some more stuff has happened. People are getting arrested, or at least one individual is in custody. And so, yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So, see somebody saying this is a slow news week, huh? Yeah, actually it is. It's a very slow news week, especially with PlayStation. But gaming in general right now is it's very slow. Things are really winding down, and something I will talk about here real quick as well before I dive properly into the first topic, because I've seen a couple people bring it up. They're asking me to talk about the individual on Twitter who was once known as the Real Insider. This was somebody that we did cover briefly on the channel. They, their existence was short-lived, and is really, really bizarre But maybe not the most surprising situation. Uh, and I just want to acknowledge this because I've seen some people asking me to talk about it, or some people, mentioning it. And just to kind of give you the quick rundown of what happened, this person popped up on Twitter, another insider that called themselves the Real Insider, and they seemingly had accurate information. They were putting out info on like Assassin's Creed as well as other games. And then they started teasing out stuff about Silent Hill, which obviously caught my attention as well as I think many others. But what ended up happening is the person who was running the Real Insider's account was actually a YouTuber. They were called Dan Allen Gaming, and they were a pretty established YouTuber, I think, with almost 200,000 subscribers. And the way he got caught was he went to go respond to somebody, a question that somebody had asked the Real Insider. And I think he forgot to switch from his main account, and he accidentally responded with his main account on Twitter. And people basically put two and two together, and they're like, bro, you're the Real Insider. And I think at first he tried to like deny it, but Jason Schreier actually kind of, was working to expose this. I think because the Real Insider kind of dunked on Jason Schreier. So obviously Jason had an axe to grind there. And so this YouTuber, Dan Allen Gaming, he ended up putting out an apology video, which, to be honest, it didn't go down very well for him. A lot of people were not accepting of his apology, and a lot of people basically just saying like, dude, you're only doing this because you got caught. And something I do want to highlight as well is in his apology video, he said that what he was teasing out and what he was saying about Silent Hill and Metal Gear Solid, that those rumors were completely made up, that he didn't actually have any real information. And I think some people misunderstood what he meant by this. And I feel the need to clarify this because there have been enough rumors, enough leaks, whatever you want to call it, enough insider information to clearly see that, yeah, there is smoke here. There's some stuff that we're learning about that is truthful. Some people interpreted him saying that as everything we've heard so far about Silent Hill and everything we've heard about Metal Gear, all of it has been made up nonsense. And that's simply not true. There's clearly something going on. He was just speaking for himself, saying that he was kind of just bandwagoning and kind of jumping on things that were kind of already established. So I think that that's worth kind of pointing out here. But, when it comes to the Silent Hill and Metal Gear Solid rumors, I mean, it's like, yeah, they're tired at this point. We're ready for some proper reveals. I think I speak for pretty much everybody when I say that. So I just wanted to mention that because, again, we did cover this individual either once or twice on the channel. But it turns out that, it was YouTuber Dan Allen Gaming breaking his NDAs. And I mean, yeah, essentially he ruined his career. And look, I feel like when it comes to insiders, right? Like if you want to be an insider and you actually have good information, whether that's from people just talking to them, or it's because you're signing NDAs, you're choosing to be an insider and try to make a name for yourself, you're already playing with fire. You're already taking a risk. But when you are doing so while also being an established content creator, where you are signing NDAs, you are getting early access to stuff, I mean, you are really playing with fire at that point. And so, you know how it goes, guys. If you live by the sword, you have to be prepared to die by the sword. And one last thing I want to say on this matter before I move on is I think that this whole situation does also speak to just the I don't even know what to call it, but the weird growth, I guess you could say, in choosing to be an insider and trying to be an insider and be a leaker and gain a reputation and gain that clout. And, I've had opportunities in the past where I've been told things. And when I used to get DMs on Twitter, I used to get stuff all the time of people claiming this and claiming that and trying to prove this and prove that. And I thought about going down that path, but I chose to stray away from it because to me it seemed too risky. Again, like you're really playing with fire at that point, and I just decided that look, with my channel here and with the content I create, the most I'm ever going to do at this point is I'm just going to relay the reports and the information that's being put out there. I don't ever really want to be the source because, I mean, unless it was something so absolutely trustworthy, right? Unless it's something just where it's like, I personally know this individual and they would never lie to me about anything, and I'm just 100% trusting in them. Unless it's something like that extreme, which never happens, I just don't feel comfortable. Because it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. With stuff like this, it is what it is. So yeah, there comes a new insider that arises, and just as quickly as they arose, they toppled and are now a pile of ashes. So we'll see what else comes of that, if anything. Josh Z, a member for 30 months. Thank you, man. You're saying finished part 1 and Left Behind the other day, and to be honest, the amount of foreshadowing for the tone of part 2 is much larger than I expected. You have Bill's town and the lakeside resort, particularly, and the talk Ellie has with Sam too. Yet, Josh, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I did tell you guys I want to talk about what I've been playing, and one of the things that I'm done playing now, but I was playing, was The Last of Us Part 1. I did get the platinum, and that's exactly what I was thinking too, Josh. Like, there were multiple moments in that game where, like, it just hit different. It hit differently this time around when you hear certain things. Like when Ellie says, like you said, when she's talking to Sam and he asks her, what are you really afraid of? And she kind of is just like, oh, I'm afraid of spiders or whatever, And he's like, no, like, really though, like, what are you really afraid of? And she says, I'm afraid of being alone. And then you think about The Last of Us 2 and you think about everything that transpired and you're like, wow, that is, it definitely, yeah, some parts of that game really truly do foreshadow, what's to come in both good and bad ways. But, yeah, I was thinking about that after finishing The Last of Us Part 1. I was thinking to myself, like, do I want to go back and play The Last of Us Part 2? But I think for now I decided against it, simply because, to me, The Last of Us Part 1 is pretty much a perfect game, or as close to perfection as a game can get. Playing the game again and just kind of experiencing it in this fidelity, it really kind of reminded me of what I loved about The Last of Us and why I had so much passion for this. I mean, it's a series now, but for this game and just the emotions that it evoked. And I think what I decided for myself was, The Last of Us 2 is an absolutely insane roller coaster ride of emotion in all different directions. And I just got some sense of satisfaction after completing The Last of Us Part 1 and just going through that again, going through that journey and just seeing how that game ended. And just kind of saying, you know what? I'm just going to leave it here for now. I'm just going to leave it here for now. I think the day will come where I will replay The Last of Us Part 2, but it's still so fresh in my mind. And I know what happens. And like you said, kind of playing through some of this stuff again, it kind of foreshadows and it just evokes certain memories of playing through The Last of Us 2, kind of going back and forth. But, that's one thing I really did enjoy about Part 1 is once again, just going on that journey with Joel and Ellie, experiencing that again. And, I feel like this can be said for pretty much anything, whether it's a video game, a movie, a book. You go back, you think you remember everything so clearly, right? You think you do, and then you go back and you experience it again, and it just becomes clear that a lot of stuff I did remember, but there's also some stuff that I either wasn't remembering quite right, or there are just things that you're noticing this time around that you just simply didn't notice the first time, or even the first 3 times. And that's what's so impressive to me about The Last of Us, not just Part 1, but just The Last of Us in general, is that there's just so much there. There's so much there, and there's so many subtle things to unpack that maybe you miss the first time, or you forget. So, The Last of Us Part 1, absolutely amazing game. I mean, look, let's just call it what it is. The Last of Us is a masterpiece. I know that there's a lot of discourse around whether or not this game should have been remade, if it was necessary to remake, the price tag, it being $70. And we've talked about all that. But the fact still remains that regardless of how you feel about whether it needed a remake or not, regardless of how you feel about the price tag, The Last of Us, for what it is a masterpiece of a game. And one of the best stories ever told, in my opinion. And, to give my opinion, now that I have fully completed The Last of Us Part 1, I'm sure the question is, okay, you played through it, you did everything there is to do, you played the Left Behind DLC, you got the platinum, you also paid $70 for it. Was it worth it? Does it feel worth it? I'm going to answer that in one moment. I want to get to this super chat from Planet Schlorpian. Thank you for the 10, my friend. You're saying, that's why I think Part 1 Remake is needed to tie both games together for modern hardware and bring them full circle. I love both games. Yeah, a lot of people have said that. A lot of people basically have said that, look, The Last of Us Part 1 had to be brought forward to really, like you said, complete the circle for The Last of Us 1 and Part 2. And so I guess the question I have at this point is, seeing what they did for The Last of Us Part 1, are they going to do the same thing for Part 2? I mean, it's interesting because Sony and Naughty Dog really haven't done much with The Last of Us Part 2 since it launched. The only thing I recall them doing is offering the 60 FPS patch. I think it was a patch when the PS5 launched, so you could play it at 60 FPS on the PS5. But outside of that, they haven't really touched it. They haven't done anything. And I am curious about what they're planning on doing with that, because they have the HBO show coming. We know the HBO show is focusing on Joel and Ellie and the first game. And, assuming that this HBO show is successful, assuming that The Last of Us Part 1 is successful to a certain degree, you have to begin to wonder, where do they go from here? The Last of Us Part 2 maybe is out of most people's minds. The Last of Us 1, Joel and Ellie, this is what's at the forefront of most people's minds. So I am very curious. I don't think they're going to remake the second one. I mean, that sounds kind of ridiculous, right? That would be taking things way too far. But I do wonder if they're going to do a director's cut for The Last of Us Part 2, and if they're going to try to tie that in with the show or not. I have no idea. I'm very curious to see what they're planning on doing and how they're going to execute on that. But But I do agree with you, Planet Schlorpian. You know, I think that there are at least some people who are buying PS5s who haven't played The Last of Us. Maybe they did play The Last of Us 2, or maybe they're just not familiar with it and they're like, you know what, I'm going to give this game a try. But to answer the question, now that I've platinumed the game, do I feel as though it was worth a $70 purchase? I feel like I did talk about this. I don't know if it was my last podcast or the one before that, but I just want to put a bow on it now that I'm completely finished with the game and I'm done with it, because when I answered this question previously, I was only part way through my first playthrough. So here's the best way I could put it. For me personally, it did not feel like it was fully worth a $70 price tag, simply because I can't help but sit back and think to myself, you know, I do recall playing this game not that long ago. It's not like it's been like 8 years or 10 years since I played it. It was just a couple of years ago, and it just felt like it was very recent. Now, granted, there were things that I did forget and there were things that I missed, but it just felt like it was still kind of too recent, you know? And that combined with, and again, I know that there are some people where they're like, dude, who cares? Who cares about the multiplayer? Well, you know, I care. I care about the multiplayer, and I'm certainly not the only one that cares about the multiplayer. For me, it really truly just felt like, you know, look, you're giving me The Last of Us Part 1, which is like between a 12 and 15 hour story. You're giving me that after giving us a remaster. You're giving me the Left Behind DLC, which is, for me, it was like about 3 hours, 3.5 hours. It was very short, maybe 4 hours. So, you know, all in all, I'd say roughly it's anywhere between 15 and 20 hours with those two things combined. I really just felt like, you know, asking for full $70, in order for that price tag to feel like it's justified, in my opinion, it would have needed the multiplayer. The multiplayer would have added an immense amount of replayability. I'd still be playing it right now, and it would feel like a totally complete package, because this is a piece of content that did ship with both the original game, if I'm not mistaken, and remastered. And I know that there are people that don't feel that same way, because they feel like, well, look, they're giving us the Left Behind DLC, so that should be enough, right? And maybe to some people it is. I'm not here to speak on behalf of anybody but myself right now. For some people, maybe that is enough, but I played through the game. I got all the trophies in the main game. I played through the DLC. I got all the trophies. I got the platinum. And, you know, to me, an appropriate price point for this game in particular would have been $50. I think $50 would have been the perfect price point for this. I think it would have saved a lot of, I don't know that it would have stopped everybody from complaining, but I think it would have done a good job in mitigating the amount of discourse. And so, you know, $50 would have been, I think, a much more acceptable price point for a lot of people. So that's just my opinion. But I want to add this as well, because I did say this previously and I still feel this way. If you are somebody who purchased a PlayStation 5 and you've never played The Last of Us, you never played it on PS3, you never played remastered, I do think this game is absolutely worth $70 if it's your first time experiencing it. This is absolutely the best way to experience The Last of Us. And so there you go. I guess my opinion on the matter didn't really change much, but I just wanted to kind of update you now that I've finished it. Yeah, that's how I feel. It should have been $50. It's $70. And so I feel like the only way it's really going to feel truly worth that $70 is if it's your first time playing it. Am I going to try permadeath? I don't think so. That sounds incredibly infuriating and stressful, frankly. So Probably not. Um, Let me see, Josh. Thank you for the 5, man. You're saying finally beat Elden Ring, 170 hours. The game dragged, and I wasn't a fan of having to look up everything. The last 60, wow, the last 60 hours was a drag. 7 out of 10. Interesting, Josh. I think that's certainly considered a polarizing take, maybe a not so popular take, but yeah, it's interesting because when I think back on Elden Ring, well, first of all, I didn't put 170 hours into the game. I put about 90 to 95 hours into it. But I do kind of understand where you're coming from, man. I've said it before and I will say it again because it's the truth for me. I began to get pretty frustrated at certain times with Elden Ring and the lack of direction. I just, there were some moments where I was like, oh, it's cool to discover things and kind of come across things on your own. But other times when I'm just trying to progress and just trying to figure out like what am I supposed to do here, man? Like I really don't want to have to look it up. Um it really became, like you said, a little bit of a drag in that instance where my hope for Elden Ring 2, because we're obviously going to get Elden Ring 2, for a game as massive as Elden Ring and that has that much content and that much stuff in it, I feel like at the very least what From Software should do, I doubt they will do this, but I really think they should do this, especially because more and more people are going to be buying their games going forward now that they've reached like this incredible mainstream success. They should at least give the option in the settings where you basically, or at the beginning, they ask you, like, do you want to have, I don't want to call it hints, but do you want to have any guidance and any instruction, anything at all to tell you where you're supposed to go, what you're supposed to do, or no? And you basically just toggle it on or off. So, I feel like you kind of get the best of both worlds. You're giving people options. So if you're somebody like me, where it's like, I would prefer to have a little bit of guidance. I feel like I would enjoy the game more that way. I feel like I would get more out of the game from that. To where somebody else is like, absolutely not. That would ruin the experience for me. That is part of the experience, not knowing anything, discovering everything organically by myself. I think just having that option would be a great thing. And, I respect From Software's decision if they say, no, we're not going to do that. We're just going to do it the way we want. I respect that. It's their game. It's their vision. And if that's how they want people to experience their game, regardless of whether people like it or not, I respect that. I'm not saying that they have to do this or they have to do that. It's just a suggestion on my part that I think a lot of people would be grateful for that. But what's crazy though is you already know that if From Software were to do that, it would create some kind of big problem on the internet where people would begin to fight and argue. And it's like, I don't think there's anything wrong with giving some options like that. I really don't. So a very, very interesting take there, Josh. But I think also a very honest one. I think Elden Ring is a game where it's achieved a level of success and a level of mainstream appeal where I think some people are afraid to talk negatively about it if that's how they actually feel. But I think people just have to be honest. And Josh, I think you're being very honest here, which is good. I see somebody asking if I played the Wolong beta. No, I actually haven't yet. I haven't. I didn't they say, I think it's how much longer is it available for? Because I probably should try it out. It is a game I'm interested in. So I probably should try it out. Oh, you think it's gone already? No way. Already? Hold on now. You're telling me I missed it? Okay. All right. Well, that's all. That's obviously okay. Well, that's my fault then. All right, I missed the bus on that one. Today's the last day, you're saying. Well, you know what? I'll check later on if it'll still be available. If it's not, I'm not going to sweat it. Obviously, it'll be my fault. So I'll check later when I turn my PlayStation on. If it's still available, I'm going to download it. If I missed it, I'm probably going to go watch some people play it on YouTube to get a better feel for it, because it is a game I'm interested in. I didn't think it was going to be over so soon, though. I know it was a short-lived demo that they were putting out, but that's really short. JDTV, a member for 17 months. Thank you, man. You're saying, after getting the platinum in The Last of Us Part 1 and watching the Cyberpunk 2077 Netflix series, I decided to give Cyberpunk a try, especially since it's on sale. I love it. I will get the platinum for sure. Yeah, it turns out, JDTV, that you are far from the only one who is deciding to give Cyberpunk 2077 a chance. This game is seeing a massive resurgence, and I think it is due to the Netflix series. I've seen a lot of people talking about it. Apparently, it's hitting like new peaks, which is crazy. And it's safe to say that Cyberpunk 2077 has made a massive comeback. Now, I think people are being, I don't want to say they're being too forgiving, because they're not. Like, Cyberpunk 2077 launched a while ago at this point. I just think that some people are being a little bit disingenuous when they basically make it sound like, we told you from the start that Cyberpunk 2077 was always a great game, and you're now just seeing that. And I feel like, well, okay, I feel like that's where we have to pump the brakes just a little bit, not necessarily hold anything against CD Projekt Red at this point, because it's like, again, it's in the past, and I'm not about holding on to grudges, but we shouldn't forget the state that this game launched in, and that people had every right to be as upset and as harsh on the game as they were. And I think, if anything, we might want to be just a little bit careful here, just how much we begin to hype it up, only because we do want CD Projekt Red, as well as every other publisher, to remember that you can't do stuff like that, and the game's making a comeback. A lot of positivity is being spread about it, and I think that's great. And you know what? It probably, to a degree, always was a great game in terms of what they were looking to achieve, and what the final product could be if it didn't launch in such a disastrous state. And so, I just think that the people who are basically pushing back against those who were against this game when it first launched, I don't know that you should be doing that, because people had some very good reasons, absolutely, for being against Cyberpunk 2077 when it launched, mainly because it was broken almost entirely. So hopefully CD Projekt Red has learned from that, though. And, going forward, the hope is whatever it is they release next, whenever it is they release it, nothing like that ever happens again. Not just for CD Projekt Red, but for any AAA video game. So I'm happy to hear that, JDTV. PlayStation Pete, you're saying if Elden Ring, I know you meant to say Elden Ring. If Elden Ring wins Game of the Year, does Sony win, since they own 14% of From Software? I mean, I guess on the most technical sense, sure, to a degree, but I think, Sony came in late, right? Sony only just recently invested into From Software, so I don't want to sit here and say that Sony would win per se, because it's like, look, it's not their studio, it's not PlayStation Studios, it's not a game that they funded, it's not a game that they had any say in when it comes to development, when it comes to, so I'm only, I'm entertaining this PlayStation Pete because if Elden Ring does win Game of the Year, I think you will see some extremists come out and say that Sony wins, and I think that that's just going to make them look kind of silly because it's like, really, Sony owns a 14% stake. I mean, if we want to look at things that way, then you could look at it as anytime Fortnite wins anything at any, you know, at any event or anytime they're being awarded something, you could say, well, Sony is too, because Sony has an investment in Epic Games. But does anybody look at it like that? No, because it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't really make much sense. So if Elden Ring wins Game of the Year, the credit needs to go to, and absolutely should go to, From Software and and Bandai Namco, for believing in this game and putting it out there. And I mean, I don't think anybody anticipated just how big of a success Elden Ring was going to be. So, Sony, I think, if anything, the only thing Sony cares about, I mean, look, we know that Sony cares about awards. We know that Sony wants to win Game of the Year every year. But the reason why Sony invested into From Software is because they don't want to see these games taken away. They don't want to see future From Software titles taken away from the PlayStation platform. And that's all it comes down to. So Elden Ring 2, Dark Souls 4, if that ever is a thing, whatever else From Software is going to develop, new Armored Core, that's what that was about. But to finish up my final topic here, which is still focused on what I've been playing, I do want to briefly give my thoughts on something else I've been playing. Granted, I stopped playing it very quickly. Maybe some of you can guess what this is. I didn't have to pay for it, luckily, but I did download it, and I did give it a try. And it didn't take long for me to uninstall it and to just walk away from it and say, you know what? I think I'm good. I think, yeah. Blue Streak was the first to get it. MW2. Yeah. Yep. I see somebody saying Star Ocean 6. No, it wasn't Star Ocean 6. I'm just going to very quickly and very briefly give my thoughts on it. So yeah, the open beta went live for everybody, and I downloaded Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, and I just want to give you a little bit of context here so you understand. I'm somebody who's been playing Call of Duty for a very, very, very long time. I've been playing since the earliest days. I mean, I'm talking about I've been playing like Call of Duty since Big Red 1. All right, now granted, I'm not like the biggest Call of Duty fanatic. It's just a series that I've just always enjoyed pretty casually. And more recently, I'd say in the past like 5 to 6 years, I guess maybe that's not that recent, but in the past 5 to 6 years, I really kind of fell off of Call of Duty. Like I started to lose interest rapidly. I would still play the game, but I would notice that each year, like, I'm quitting it sooner and sooner. And it just got to a point where I've considered just skipping it. But for me and some of my friends, it's been so annualized. It's become routine where it's like, oh yeah, the new Call of Duty's out, and we just play it, and a month, 2 months goes by, and then we just don't play it. And it's like, okay. And to be fair, I haven't always enjoyed, but most of Call of Duty's campaigns, most of their single player campaigns I've enjoyed. I do think Call of Duty has had some of the best single player games out there. I feel like it's been a while, but I think about like Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, Modern Warfare 1 through 3. These games were awesome. And I think they kind of dropped as time went on and got a little bit worse and worse each time. And then, Modern Warfare 2019 came out, and I really was right there with everybody. With Modern Warfare 2019, I was like, okay, this is taking my nostalgia to its upper limit. I'm going to buy this game and I think I'm going to love it because I loved Modern Warfare 1, 2, and 3 back in the day. And I was like really shocked when I played Modern Warfare 2019. I'm like, oh, okay, this is very, very different. This feels a lot more like Battlefield than it does Call of Duty. And I gave up on Modern Warfare very quickly. But then the year after that, Black Ops Cold War came out, and I'm like, oh, you know what? This is giving me more nostalgia here. Like, I loved Black Ops. Black Ops 1 is one of my favorite games. I have so many great memories with that. Love the story, like Mason, what do the numbers mean? I'm all about this. So Black Ops Cold War was actually really good. I really did enjoy that Call of Duty, and I can honestly say I think that's the final Call of Duty I'll ever enjoy, because then Vanguard came out, and that just looked, frankly, I'm not trying to downplay any work that developers do, but it Vanguard didn't look good at all to me. So I'm like, yeah, no thanks. Now, Modern Warfare 2 for me is kind of like the last stand, where it's like, look, they're over here saying this is like a new start for Call of Duty. I don't care about Warzone. So I downloaded this beta, and within just like 5 matches, I'm just like, I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. The graphics look good. The gunplay is smooth, but I'm just like, these maps, it doesn't feel like an arcade shooter anymore. It feels like Battlefield with a time to kill that is so ridiculously quick. Like, the time to kill is so fast. I was just like, I even tried the third person mode, and I was so excited. I was so excited for the third person mode, and I was like, this is it, man. Like, this is going to be my resurgence into Call of Duty again. And it was really cool to be running around in third person, to see my character for the first time in like forever. And I'm like, this is cool. And then it's just ruined because I'm like, I can't do this gameplay, man. People are just all over the place. They're jumping around. I can't even comprehend what's happening. But the most egregious part of it to me is the map design. It's the fact that there's so many different flanking spots. It can't just be a simple 3-lane map. There has to be doors. There has to be verticality. You can sit there and you can mount a corner if you want. And I'm just like, between that and the skill-based matchmaking, and that is the thing that really did it for me, was just so you know, I played more than 5 rounds. I just want to make it clear, I did play more than 5 rounds, okay? And I know that skill-based matchmaking has always been a thing. Skill-based matchmaking is why I stopped really playing Call of Duty. You say I need to get good. Yeah, maybe. I am getting older. Maybe I just completely lost my edge. But the thing is, I noticed that my first 3 games of Modern Warfare 2, I was owning, dude. I mean, I was just stomping, and I felt really good. I'm like, this is I'm feeling this. This is bringing me back to my classic Call of Duty days. And then after that, it's just like, once this, you can immediately feel the skill-based matchmaking kick in, because after that, it's not that I was getting stomped on and owned. It's that it was just, I'm trading kills now every game. Every single game I'm trading kills. And I feel like every game I'm playing is like an MLG match, where we are going as far as we can to our upper limits to try to win this game, because it means everything. And I'm like, I'm just trying to play this game and enjoy it, man. I'm not trying to, every time I just want to get a couple rounds in on Call of Duty, feel like I gotta be hyped up on G Fuel, and hopped up on caffeine after drinking 3 espresso shots, just to feel like I can compete. It's not fun. It's just not fun. And so, what happened, and I'm going to get to these super chats in just a moment, guys, just to kind of, and I don't mean to sound like such a complainer either, because I have seen people saying that they're really enjoying Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 and they love it. And that's where, like, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, Call of Duty's done and it's garbage now. And look, I've spent many years with Call of Duty and I understand how these things work. I'm bowing out. I'm hanging up the hat. I'm retiring. I'm retiring the jersey, so to speak. Like, my time has come and gone, and this game has now become something that feels unfamiliar to me. It feels just like I can't keep up with it anymore. And I'm not mad at it. I'm not mad at it. Great merch idea, MBG. Quote, "It's just not fun." Yeah, that is pretty good. I'll keep that in the back of my mind. But I'm ready to just gracefully bow out and say, Call of Duty, it's been fun. It's been a good time, but I think our time is up, and I'm gonna move on now. And yeah, I'm not saying that I'm done with first-person shooters or anything like that. I still like first-person shooters. I still love competitive games to a degree, but I just think that, at least with Call of Duty, it's just not doing it for me anymore. Also, one other complaint I have before I move on is, and maybe this is just me, but one of the things that just, it made me so, not frustrated, but I'm just like, what is going on here right now? The menu design for Modern Warfare 2 is so ridiculous to me. I'm like, how? This is the best you guys can come up with for one of the biggest AAA video games in the entire industry. This is what you're going with your menu design. And some people might like it, but to me, I'm just like, this is, I just can't do this. I feel like it's triggering something in my mind, and it's not good. So I uninstalled. Yeah, I see the chat right now. So I uninstalled Modern Warfare 2, and yeah, I'm giving my final farewell, sending it off. Obviously, Modern Warfare 2 is going to be a immense success. It's going to sell like crazy. Warzone 2 is going to be a huge hit. But at this point, this is where I'm more curious than ever before to see what new games can kind of fill this void for me. Sony has some multiplayer games in development, some live service games. Now more than ever, I'm open to seeing, okay, let's see what they are. So, and yeah, so that's what I think about Modern Warfare 2. I'm sure they're going to make some changes to it, but I don't think there's any change they could make that would make me suddenly be like, you know what? I'm ready to go back to Call of Duty. All right, let me see here. We have Techie6. You're saying, if God of War Ragnarok wins Game of the Year, then people would claim that Sony rigged it. That's sadly how people think these days. Yeah, I mean, look, man. I do think that God of War Ragnarok is going to be a Game of the Year contender for sure. You could just kind of tell, like, it's exuding that energy for sure. Man, yeah, that conversation is not going to be fun, frankly, because people are going to get ridiculous about it. But it'll go the other way too. If Elden Ring wins Game of the Year, there's going to be a lot of people arguing why it shouldn't. And I look at it like this. I'm going to assume, because we don't know the Game of the Year nominees yet. And, well, there are two things here. Number one, people need to stop treating Jeff Keighley's Game of the Year awards like it's the be-all, end-all, because it's not. I know that it's the most talked about, and it is at this point considered like the most prestigious Game of the Year award. But believe me when I tell you, when it comes to award shows and just winning awards in general that actually matter, the Game of the Year awards is kind of a joke to developers. Things like the BAFTAs and the DICE Awards, these are the award shows that developers care about. These are the awards where if you're winning at these shows as a developer, you're feeling really good about what you achieved. Game of the Year for Jeff Keighley's show is more of a popularity contest. And that's no disrespect, because I enjoy watching the Game Awards and I appreciate them. And I think it's nice what Jeff does by putting on this show for sure. And it does create a lot of conversation, for better or worse. But we have to see it for what it is. And it really is more of a popularity contest. And so that's not to say that publishers don't appreciate it, because trust me, if Sony wins Game of the Year at Jeff Keighley's Game of the Year Awards, they're feeling really good about it, and they like that. Same thing with Microsoft. It's still a good thing for the developer and for the publisher, but it's just not the be-all, end-all. And I think too many people continue to talk about it like it is. Like, if a game doesn't win Game of the Year, that means it's obviously not good enough to, for anybody to say that it's their Game of the Year. And I just think that's crazy. That's just silly talk. I don't know why anybody would ever think that way. But, if God of War Ragnarok does win Game of the Year 2022, I mean, of course, man, you're going to see people saying that Sony paid off Jeff and it's rigged and the whole 9 yards. And, but I say, let it just go the course it's going to go. If God of War wins Game of the Year, then it wins Game of the Year. If Elden Ring wins Game of the Year, let it win Game of the Year. If something else wins Game of the Year, then let it win Game of the Year. And we'll just talk about it as it happens. But the one thing I do appreciate about the Game Awards, before I move on to the next Super Chat, is I like the passion, most of it anyway, that people bring to the table. I think that's what makes it fun. I think that's what makes it interesting, is people are very passionate about the games they love, and you can see that. I just think that sometimes people take it a little too far and they kind of twist it. But I feel like the passion is there, and that's what we should probably focus on when we're able to. So thank you for that, Techie6. We have a Pragmatic Hat. You're saying, does everybody have their pre-orders in on Valkyrie Elysium September 29th? Yeah, so I don't know if I'm going to be playing Valkyrie Elysium. It's not a game that immediately appeals to me. Maybe I'll see how it reviews. I'll listen to what people are saying about it. I saw that something else also got delayed. I don't know if it's intertwined with Valkyrie Elysium. But yeah, I can honestly say that that's not really a game that's at the top of my list right now. Actually, to fully finish my original topic before I move on. Oh, you guys are saying there is a demo for Valkyrie Elysium. Yeah, maybe I should give that a try. But the game that I'm actually planning on playing next, I think it should be coming in today. Bought a physical copy of it. Is Steel Rising. I looked into this gameplay and I've heard good things about it. It's a Souls-like game. So I'm going to play Steel Rising. I think it looks really, really good. So I'll report to you guys next week how I feel about that once I get some good time with it. Actually, it says right here my package was delivered, so it's here. It's here now, guys. All right, so thank you for that, Pragmatic Cat. And then we have a very generous $50 donation from JD Gamer. Thank you so much for that, man. That's a really, I mean, don't get me wrong. Anybody who donates $2, $5, $10, $20, anything at all, greatly appreciate it. But especially, I mean, such a generous donation. It really, really means a lot, man. You're saying here, Elden Ring is the likely winner for Game of the Year 2022, with only God of War really able to challenge it. MBG, what is your prediction for Game of the Year? A bigger and better question might be with the expected lineup of a PlayStation and Xbox in 2023. Predict console sales, US and world, and game of the year. Well, to answer your first part, man, my prediction for game of the year, I mean, look, I feel like my prediction, there are basically two answers I can give here. My logical prediction is I think Elden Ring is going to win. Just logically speaking, I feel like God of War is going to be an amazing game, easily one of the best games that comes out this year, probably this generation. But I feel like something about Elden Ring and just how the way it's kind of penetrated the mainstream, I think logically that's my prediction. It's going to be Elden Ring. Now, my personal desire, I guess, would be I would like to think that God of War Ragnarok could win Game of the Year. I would like to imagine a scenario where God of War Ragnarok launches this November, and people are obviously excited and they're anticipating in a big, exciting game. But like once it's out and people are beating it, they're just like totally blown away. Where they're like, wow, I expected a lot from this game and it just totally surpassed my expectations. So that's like, you know, on a personal level, that's what I would like to see because, you know, I'm very excited for God of War. And I think that when it's all said and done, I'm going to find that I'm going to get more enjoyment out of God of War personally than I would have Elden Ring. That I anticipate just because of the nature of the type of game that God of War is. It's got a robust story. It's got that, like, you know, it's got all the boxes checked off that I look for in a big AAA game that I want. That Elden Ring checks off most of those boxes as well, but they are very different games. So hopefully that answers the first part of your question, man. And then you're saying a bit bigger and better question is between the lineup of what PlayStation is going to have in 2023 and what Xbox is going to have in 2023. Predict console sales, US and world. Well, I'm going to be honest with you right now, man. I feel like that's really, really difficult to predict right now. But let's just do this for a second. Let's assume that in 2023, let's assume that the chip shortage isn't really a thing at that point, right? Like we're in the middle of 2023 and we're at a point where people who want a PS5 can just pick one up. People who want an Xbox can pick one up. I think we're going to see a massive uptick with the PlayStation 5. And I don't know that I have as much confidence in Xbox. And it's nothing against Xbox. And Xbox does have a lot of games coming in 2023. And I just think 2023 is going to be a really interesting year for Xbox. And one that is a little bit more uncertain compared to PlayStation. Because here's the thing with PlayStation. Something we know with PlayStation is that when they release big games at a premium price, they move units. They move units like crazy. We've witnessed this, right? Like a game like God of War Ragnarok is going to move a ton of units. A game like Spider-Man 2 is going to just make PS5s fly off the shelves. I mean, they're already flying off the shelves. And Spider-Man 2 isn't even a thing yet, really, you know? But again, just assuming that Sony can just keep pumping these consoles out, I feel like we've already kind of seen the cadence and the trajectory. When Sony's delivering their games, this is what you can expect to happen with their console. But I think where things are a little bit different with Microsoft is, well, again, I'm not trying to throw shade at Microsoft here. I'm not. I feel like I'm just speaking the truth. We haven't really seen Microsoft hit a stride yet. And 2023 could be the first year where we see them hit a certain type of stride that we just are not familiar with. We're not really used to seeing them have game release after game release after game release. And assuming, again, the assumption is that most of these games are going to be higher quality. Games like Starfield, Redfall, You guys will have to give me. I don't know if we know anything for the second half of 2023, but assuming maybe like, I don't know. I know they have games. Apparently, they're trying to get out in 2023, but maybe you guys can list off some games. I just don't want to name any because I don't know if any have actually been confirmed yet. But you know, yeah. So that's the thing is like Hellblade 2. Stalker 2. Yeah, I don't know if Hellblade 2 is targeting 2023. Avowed, yeah, that could be one. Avowed could be one that they're trying to bring out in 2023. Yeah, so I'm bringing this up because, like, assuming that Microsoft is able to kind of release so many games within 1 year, it'll be pretty much the exact opposite of what we've seen this year. Microsoft hasn't released any games this year. And so if we see them in 2023 release 4 or 5 games throughout the year, and assuming bigger games like Starfield and Redfall are actually like as good as people are hoping they will be and they review good, the only question I really have is like, how are we going to see that impact Xbox console sales? Because Xbox has Game Pass, Sony doesn't. Sony makes it clear, like, you got to buy our console and you got to buy the game at full price. And that works for Sony. Sony gets incredible sales doing that, both with their consoles and with their games. Microsoft isn't offering that right now. Microsoft is like, if you want to buy the console, you can. If you want to buy the game at full price, you can. But, you know, we got Game Pass. Play it on your PC. Play it on your Samsung TV, right? Play it through your phone. And so, you know, when it comes to sales, I think we're going to see Sony do some big numbers in 2023. I think that's going to be a peak year for the PS5. I think Xbox is going to do really well too. I think the Series X and the Series S are both going to do well. But I think because of the nature of Game Pass and its wider availability, I still think we're going to see the PS5 continue to outpace the Series consoles. And also just because of the some of the big tentpole titles that Sony's going to have that you need a PlayStation to play. When it comes to Game of the Year 2023, it's impossible, man. It's impossible to even begin to speculate. I mean, look, Final Fantasy 16 is going to be a big game for Sony and Square Enix. Spider-Man 2 could, I mean, come on. It's going to be difficult for me to assume that Spider-Man 2 won't automatically be a Game of the Year contender. We know what Insomniac is capable of. We know that they're going to be pushing things to the limit with Spider-Man 2. But, you know, other big third-party titles are coming out as well. Starfield for Microsoft could be a Game of the Year contender. I think many people are anticipating that Starfield is going to be a Game of the Year contender. You combine that with all the different third-party games, plus all the games that aren't even announced yet. You know, that's the thing is we're in September of 2022, but there's still so many games that you have to imagine are targeting a release for next year we don't even know about. I mean, Hogwarts Legacy, that could be a Game of the Year contender for all we know. So right now, man, the sky is the limit. 2023 is looking insane. I think that the second half of 2021 and most of 2022, we're feeling it. I think we're feeling kind of like the effects of the pandemic and how it affected the gaming industry in particular. And I feel like 2023 is looking kind of like overkill to make up for that. And depending on how you view it, maybe that makes you excited, maybe that makes you nervous. Gets me excited, personally. So again, JD Gamer, thank you so much for that generous super chat. Really appreciate it. I have a $5 super chat from Eric Golden and then another 10 where you're saying, going back to Elden Ring, you really can't say it's not a win for Sony. I understand your take, but look at the sales for FromSoft in it's 2-1 sometimes, 3-1 on Sony's part. So Sony has a big part. Well, you know what? That when you put it that way, Eric Golden, see, like when we're talking about who's it a win for, I was talking about it in the context that if Elden Ring won Game of the Year, like I don't think people should be saying Sony won Game of the Year. You know what I mean? Because they're an investor in From Software or they have a stake in From Software. I don't think that is like, to me, that doesn't make any sense. But what you're talking about is a more practical win, like a win in a more bottom line sense where does Sony win? Like, does Sony get a type of win with the success that Elden Ring has found? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because when you consider that From Software games sell incredibly well on the PlayStation platform, then yes, absolutely. Like from a financial bottom line perspective, that is a big deal to Sony. And if anything, as I said, this is exactly why Sony made that investment and they decided they wanted to invest 14% into From Software because they know how detrimental it could potentially be if something were to happen where future From Software titles are no longer available on the PlayStation platform. That could hurt them. You know, we've seen this happen a few times now with Sony, and Sony's not messing around. Sony's like, look, we need to protect our platform, and this is how we do it. And so, in that sense, I do think it is a win for Sony. But I was just speaking in the context of like, if Elden Ring were to win Game of the Year, like I don't think it would be wise for anybody to come out and be like, Sony won Game of the Year 2022. Like, nah, man. Let's just stop that. So thank you for that, Eric. Blue Streak 320. You're saying Modern Warfare 2 is a Battlefield game without destruction and teamwork, and with Rainbow Six's Time to Kill. What an abomination. That's, Blue Streak 320, I appreciate that. I appreciate that description because I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head here, man. If there was any way I could describe Modern Warfare 2, it's exactly that. It's Battlefield without the destruction and teamwork, but with Rainbow Six's Time to Kill. That's exactly what it feels like, man. Love that description. I'm not going to forget that anytime soon. Sewell, you're saying, I'm a PlayStation fan, but Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Game of the Year. Well, you heard it here, everybody. Sewell has spoken. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 will be Game of the Year. Matt York says it's Battlefield hardcore mode. Yeah, I really hope Battlefield makes a comeback in the future because I was always a big Battlefield fan, but man, they lost me after Battlefield 5. I was really hoping that Battlefield 20 what I even forget the name of it. What year was it? 2070 whatever. The most recent Battlefield game. I've completely erased it from my mind. But after seeing 2042, there we go. I almost said like 2072. Yeah, 2042. After seeing just how they botched that so much, I was just like, come on, man. Like, this is why I'm so eager to see another AAA studio come out with a big FPS game that can, you look at what happened to Halo. You look at what happened to Battlefield, and I'm sorry, like, I know that Call of Duty is going to succeed no matter what, but to me, Call of Duty is just not Call of Duty anymore. It's something else. And that's fine. Things change and evolve over time. But I just want to see a studio kind of come out and bring back something that feels familiar to me. Not like a rehash or not like something that's just recycled, but something that just feels like it's going back to the roots of certain FPS games of the past. And that's why I just wasn't excited about Battlefield when I saw it, because I'm like, I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling it, and now I'm not feeling Call of Duty. So I'm like, Deviation Games, Sony, let's see what you guys can do. Guerrilla, are you making a first person shooter? What's this other game you're making? I want to know. So I'm ready. So thank you for that. Actually, That was just a response to a random chat, but thank you anyway. Jerome Montgomery, you're saying, are you ready for Plague Tale? I just beat the first. Yeah, that's a game I'm looking forward to as well. I recently, just in my video yesterday, I was talking about what the developer, Asobo Studio. I mean, it's kind of ironic to be honest. It's kind of ironic because one of the things about their game of Plague Tale Requiem is it's releasing day and date onto Game Pass, and that's a big win for Game Pass. Like that's a really really great game, really big game to get day one for Game Pass, and I feel like you just don't see that often because that's a full blown single player game. Like I don't know if you could call it full AAA, but it sure seems like it is. So that's a big win for Game Pass, but it's also just a little bit ironic because you see the developers talking about doubling down on taking advantage of the DualSense. And I'm like, the DualSense, if you think about it, really is a big difference maker between these two consoles in this generation, which is so ironic because nobody cares about the power difference anymore because it doesn't matter. Like we know that games are going to look good on either console and they're going to run well. The resolution wars, the frame rate wars, that stuff's over. But it really seems like the thing that continues to kind of stand out is what Sony decided to do with the features of the DualSense. Now, not everybody cares about it. There are a lot of people that, dude, I'm gonna play Plague Tale on Game Pass, and I do not care if I don't have haptic feedback or resistance triggers. Who cares? But I guess it's cool. I always enjoy seeing developers take full advantage of the DualSense because when it's done right, man, it goes such a long way. And you know what? I want to tell you this real quick because I think people think I'm always exaggerating with the praise that I give the DualSense. Believe me, I'm not. You know what game I recently installed? Because I'm at this point with gaming these days where I get in these moods sometimes where I'm like, I want to go back to some things because I have some good memories and I want to see if it how it is today. So I re-downloaded, and maybe it was because of the GTA 6 leaks. I re-downloaded GTA Online and I was like, you know what? Let me just go check it out. Let me see what it's like. It's been years. It's been years since I've actually played it. And first of all, playing it on the PS5, there's a couple things I just want to say real quick. Number one, it looks pretty good. You could tell it's a last generation game. Actually, it's beyond that. You could tell it's a PS3 and 360 game, but they still did a pretty good job. It looks pretty good on the PS5. But it definitely makes me kind of yearn for, all right, I'm going to see some current gen PS5, Xbox Series X Rockstar graphics. I'm ready for that. But I was pleasantly surprised when playing this for a little bit how well Rockstar Games utilized the DualSense. They did, there are just some developers that I think have a better understanding of how to fine-tune the DualSense for their games. And I see somebody asking me how the DualSense in The Last of Us Part 1 was. Really good. Very good, actually. There were multiple moments that I remember just feeling a certain haptic feedback trigger where I was like, oh, that's a nice touch there. But I was particularly surprised with GTA only because almost, I don't know, it was just done so well where when I'm driving around, even just the character walking, they actually added a little haptic feedback for that. I'm like, that is so subtle, but I notice it, and that's interesting. But then flying in a helicopter, being in water, beating somebody up on the street, getting into a car crash. I mean, it really was done so well in GTA, and I was not expecting that because, truthfully, just like I experienced with Modern Warfare 2, shortly after playing GTA Online, I'm like, I don't recognize this game anymore. I don't know what's going on here. I feel so disconnected. I feel lost. I don't I'm just there's so many weird things you can do now. I was just kind of overwhelmed. So I just decided to just kind of roam the city and mess about and yeah, that really stuck out to me and I thought I would share that with you guys because I don't know, maybe it's just me, but that was that was cool. And so I at least know with GTA 6 for PlayStation 5 whenever it comes out, even if it doesn't come out till 2025, I at least know that I can expect some great things to be done with the DualSense. So, thought I would share that with you. Skin Tight Salmon, a member for 16 months. You're saying, how's your wife liking Slime Rancher 2? My girlfriend hijacked my PC to play it. Can you tell her to get off so I can study? Well, I mean, look, if it's really so you can study, yeah, you should probably take a break, get off for a little bit. You know, studying's important, but at the same time, I understand. So my wife actually hasn't played it yet. I think she's going to soon. We've been pretty busy these days. We've been kind of in the thick of just life right now. So, but I did notice that it came out. Is it, if I'm not mistaken, isn't it in early access right now? I don't know if it's a full blown release, but yeah, she's probably going to play it soon. And whenever she does take time to sit down and give it a play, it'll probably have to be on my PC. Or can you do it through the cloud? Isn't that a thing that Microsoft offers with the Xbox One consoles? You can play some of their titles that are current gen only through the cloud, which is a pretty cool feature. Like, I actually think that's really cool. That's such an interesting and kind of smart workaround for backwards compatibility. But yeah, when she decides to give it a go, I'll be sure to report it back to you and let you know. You're saying if it's in Game Pass? Okay. Through the cloud, maybe you can, but do you want it through there? No, personally, I don't. You know, I'll mention this real quick too, because I've seen quite a few people bring it up. How Sean Layden has joined Tencent as a strategic advisor. To be frank, I don't have much to say about this. I'm not excited about that. I don't think it's a good look. I'm kind of disappointed. You know, I feel like Sean Layden, he's obviously somebody who's very good at his job. He's somebody who is very talented. And it's just sad to see how he went from being such a beneficial component to the PlayStation brand to now he's over at Tencent, you know? And the things I hear about Tencent, not good. Not good at all. So, yeah. I mean, it is what it is. It's his prerogative, and, you know, he's going to get that money. So, yeah, I'm not a fan of Tencent. I feel like, I mean, there are a lot of different places Sean Layden could have went that I would have been like, oh, yeah, you know, congratulations, man. I'm happy for you. But this is one of those where it's like, not Tencent, man. Not Tencent. But that's pretty much it. That's all I have to say about it. So yeah, you know, Sean Layden will do his thing. He wants revenge. I do wonder. I do wonder if things really went that poorly internally with Sony and he basically just got kicked out. I imagine, you know, that yeah, that probably doesn't leave you feeling very good. I could see somebody holding on to that for a while. All right, let me keep this rolling here. Mark Lovin with the 5 saying, about done getting the platinum in The Last of Us Part 1. Hope all is well. Well, I'm happy to hear that, man. Yeah, I just got my platinum for The Last of Us Part 1 this past week, and yeah, all is going well. We're doing okay here. We're keeping it going. We're keeping it going, keeping it flowing. So thank you for asking, man, and thank you for the super chat. Eric from 850. You're saying happy Sunday, MBG. Yesterday, I got the Western Digital PS5 endorsed SSD and Kena Bridge of Spirits. Did you get any of those? Thoughts? Also, go Dolphins. Well, thank you for wishing me a happy Sunday. I hope your Sunday is going well. Also, so I never picked up an SSD for my PS5. I still have no need. I know that one of the biggest things that people kind of talked about and were nervous about with the launch of the PS5 was how there wasn't even a terabyte of space for games. Now, maybe it's just the way I play games. I don't play a bunch of games at one time. I never have. I'm pretty focused with just a couple of games at any one given time at most. So I have yet to run into a problem where I run out of space. So when it comes to upgrading my SSD or expanding my storage, never did that yet. But when it comes to Kena Bridge of Spirits, yes, actually, I did play that game. I have a physical copy. It's right here next to me, and I really enjoyed it. Again, when I remember when I played that game, I kind of couldn't believe that it was the studio Ember Lab. I couldn't believe it was their first and only game. It was done just so well, and that's still a studio that I feel like Sony wants to keep. They might want to keep close because there's a lot of talent there and a lot of potential. And you think about these like teams that Sony can grow organically over time. Teams that might want to be acquired, go under the PlayStation Studios umbrella. I think Ember Lab is one of them. So I hope you enjoy it, man. And maybe next week you can let me know your thoughts on it after you play it for a while. So enjoy. Pragmatic Hat, you're saying, I love your sweater, MBG. Fall is here. The Queen is laid to rest. Time to see what Sony has for 2023. Yeah, fall is here, man. And that's true. The Queen is now laid to rest. Speaking of fall, I love the fall weather. It's my favorite season. I'm not a big fan of when it's like the dead of winter and it's freezing outside. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm also not a big fan of the middle of summer when it's just, unreasonably hot out. My favorite time of the year is definitely fall and autumn. And I just like it. It brings back great memories. Halloween is like, Halloween is my favorite holiday. So yeah, I love it, man. And it's funny because I think like summer technically officially ended on September 21st or 22nd. And it's like, just like that, the switch flipped. And, you wake up and it's like, wow, it's actually kind of chilly out now. It was literally like 90 degrees out 3 days ago, and now it's chilly out. So, but yeah, I'm, speaking of Sony and what they have for us in 2023, I'm still wondering myself, what else Sony might have planned in terms of forecasting the next 12 months or so for us. Some people still talking about a PlayStation showcase. I'm not even going to speculate on a PlayStation showcase anymore. You know what? I'm going to have to retract that statement because I'm literally going to do that exact thing with one of my topics I discussed today. But what I mean to say is after today, I don't really plan to speculate about a showcase much more because we are absolutely at that point where Sony, you're either going to do one or you're not. But maybe you guys can tell me. I don't recall a showcase of any kind for PlayStation or for a platform holder ever happening in October. Like, I feel like that's pretty unheard of. Could be wrong, but I don't know. I don't recall ever seeing a showcase in October. But yeah, if it happens, it happens. Also, I'm glad you like my hoodie here. Um, MBG, aren't we supposed to get 2 live service games before March 2023 from Sony? Surely we'll see a showcase as well. Well, that's the thing, man. That is true. We are supposed to get live service games, 2 live service games, before 2023. So, or March 2023, I should say. All right, let me see here. Subtext, you're saying, how was the DualSense in The Last of Us Part 1? So yeah, the DualSense in The Last of Us Part 1, I think, was utilized very well. I think that it's a game that just naturally lends itself well to taking advantage of it. You know, I mean, you got the bow and arrow, obviously, but the thing I really enjoyed, and it's just something I continue to enjoy with a lot of games, is the difference in the triggers with different weapons. So, you know, the difference in the amount of pressure when you're using a pistol versus if you're pulling out a rifle. You just feel that tension increase. I've always enjoyed that because it just adds like a really nice, I don't know. I always use the word layer, but it really does add more to the overall feeling of using certain weapons. You just get a much better feel for it. So I really enjoyed it, and I think it was done very well. And I hope to see Naughty Dog kind of take it even further with their multiplayer game. JD Gamer, once again, you're saying expectations for Xbox: Starfield, Redfall, Forza, Hellblade 2, Diablo, Stalker 2, Ravenlock, and on PS5, Spider-Man 2, Final Fantasy 16, and Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth. So, I mean, look, dude, all those games that you just listed out for Xbox, that would be shocking, quite frankly. That would be shocking if Microsoft was able to deliver all of those games in a single year. I honestly doubt they'll be able to, truthfully speaking, because that just seems like too much. It does. At least with like, I could see Hellblade 2 having to be removed from that. Starfield, I could see them getting out, and Redfall, obviously. Those two are getting out next year. Diablo, yeah, I could see that. Stalker 2, I think Stalker 2 is kind of up in the air right now. Ravenlock, I forgot what that game is. I'd have to see that again. And so that's the thing, you know, you point out like these 3 big games. I don't know that Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth is coming next year, frankly. I think Final Fantasy Rebirth is probably an early 2024 game. I think people don't want to hear that, but I think that's the truth. I think Square Enix and Sony are more than happy with getting a new mainline Final Fantasy with 16 in 2023. Spider-Man 2, I think that's obviously the fall or holiday game for Sony. And at this point, I am just wondering, you know, what else does Sony have prepared for 2023? I think obviously a lot more PC ports. I think that's a safe bet. But beyond that, you know, what about like some new PS5 games? Primal Plasma, member for 18 months. You're saying Fortnite also changes so much from season to season that if you miss a couple, you need to relearn the gameplay. Yeah, I mean, that's the problem, I think, with a lot of live service games, especially bigger ones. Uh, when you take a break from them, you know, because that's happened to me before. I remember like being into games like PUBG. When you take a break and you go back, you pretty much have to relearn the game all over again. So that's definitely true. Figuratively literal. You're saying, to be honest, GTA San Andreas will always be my favorite GTA. It changed my whole perspective on what a game could be when it came out. Yeah, dude, GTA San Andreas was kind of groundbreaking to a degree. I mean, I do remember when that game came out, and GTA was already, you know, between GTA 3 and then GTA Vice City. And then GTA San Andreas, it really just kind of, yeah, it's very impressive to see how Rockstar could just kind of keep going up and up and up without kind of toppling over. But San Andreas was an incredible game, man. And I think a lot of people, if you were to ask them, like, what's your greatest, like, what's the first game you think of when you think about, like, the PlayStation 2 or, when you think about just gaming, right? And nostalgia. I think GTA San Andreas is one of those games that a lot of people would bring up. So definitely one of my all-time favorites. Axis Hawk, you're saying not gonna lie, Tencent getting Layden is a big W for them. Yeah, I guess in a way, in terms of just sheer talent, yeah, I agree. Sewell, you're saying, do you know of Lost Soul Aside? So I've actually heard of it, and I think I've seen a little bit of it. But other than that, I'm not too familiar. I know that it's a game that people are looking forward to. I don't know if it's a PlayStation exclusive or not. But yeah, I might have to. I don't know. To be honest, it's hard to keep track of all the games these days. There are just so many different games in development, so many different games just coming out at any given time. It's hard to keep track of all of them. And subtext, you're saying if you had to bet money, is there a showcase this year? If I had to bet money, I would bet. I would bet on there being a showcase. Yes, I would because the reason why I say that is because I just don't understand. Like, I know that there are people who are convinced that there's no showcase happening this year, and I understand. Like, I'm not here to say, like, no, guys, don't give up hope. It's not about that. Logically speaking, it would make no sense. It would legitimately be detrimental for Sony's bottom line to not have a showcase. There's a couple obvious reasons for this. Number one, and this is the biggest, is they have a whole new VR headset. And what's weird is talking about PSVR2. This was a topic I wanted to touch on later, but I'll just talk about it now. The marketing is beginning to ramp up, but I almost do begin to wonder, like, is this how they're going to do it? Like, they're not going to have a proper showcase for PSVR2. They're just going to release these trailers and announce these games through blog posts. And then, we still don't have a price for it. We still don't have a release date. I wouldn't be shocked. I would be a little bit surprised, but not completely shocked if Sony's just like, you know what, guys, we're just going to announce the release date and the the price through a blog post. And here are some other VR2 games. I just think that that's a little strange, though, if they decide to do that, because it's like, why would you be so subtle and so, I mean, at the same time, though, considering PSVR 2 is going to be expensive, it's going to probably be $500. It's a niche product, and you do need a PS5 for it. It kind of does make a little bit of sense why Sony would want to do that. But here's another reason why I feel like it doesn't make sense for Sony to not do a showcase. We just don't know enough. We just don't know enough about the future of PlayStation. We don't know enough about 2023 with PS5 games. I mean, even if somebody were to say, well, we know we're getting Spider-Man 2, it's like, yeah, but when's the last time we saw it? We haven't gotten any updates on that, Oh, well, we have Forspoken coming. Well, yeah, but that was never meant to be a 2023 game. So when you take this into consideration, and there are just so many studios that we haven't heard from Sony in a long time, it would just be truly baffling to me if they decided that, you know what, we're not going to hold a proper showcase this year. Because, it's unheard of. It's unheard of. I wouldn't necessarily be mad. I wouldn't be mad. I would be disappointed. Like, I was really looking forward to a showcase, but at that point, I would just be confused. Like, I would really be wondering, like, okay, well, if Sony's not doing a showcase this year, then when are they going to do one again? And it would just turn into a situation where it's like, come February 2023, okay, guys, I think Sony might be holding a showcase this month, and it's like, we're all hollowed out at that point, shriveled up. But to be honest, I've been waiting for Sony to kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say hype people up, because that's not the way I'm trying to frame it. It's not that I'm waiting for Sony to hype people up. I'm waiting for them to show more of their hand. That's all it is. Because I look forward to it. I look forward to, in the same way that I was so excited to learn about games like Returnal, to learn about games like Demon Souls Remake, and Spider-Man Miles Morales. I was excited to learn about Spider-Man 2. I was excited to learn about God of War Ragnarok, so on and so forth. It's the same thing. Like, now I'm excited to learn about what's next. What's the next 12 months? And I think if there's one thing that has become kind of apparent with the way Sony likes to do this, though, is something, I don't want to say it's a safe bet, because the biggest mistake I've made in my time covering PlayStation are my assumptions. Is me always assuming that I understand the way Sony's going to do something, and how they're going to do it, and the reasoning behind why they're going to do it. And I'm wrong almost every time. I cannot predict Sony. It doesn't mean I won't try to at certain times. That's part of the whole experience here. But I will never say anything for certain with certainty anymore with Sony, because they have proven time and time again that you may think you know what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, but you probably don't, and you won't see this coming. And so, this is not me saying that this is what they're going to do, but it's what we've seen them do at least a couple of times now. And it seems like what Sony likes to do and what they prefer to do, and it does make sense, is they like to show stuff that's not too far out. They will show some stuff that's a little bit further out, but in general, if they hold a showcase, most of the stuff they're going to show you is stuff that they plan to get out the door in the next 12, maybe 18 months at most. And they kind of seem to stick with that. I think Wolverine is a little bit of an outlier there, but as far as I can tell, that's really the only outlier. So let me see here. Divilac 47, you're saying MBG, you're forgetting that earlier in the year, Sony said on the blog that they were going to release more info about games without relying on a showcase. I don't recall that. I don't recall it being that specifically worded. Like, what I mean to say is, I don't recall reading a blog post from Sony where they basically said, like, we don't plan on relying on a showcase. This is how we're going to roll out info. I think if what you're trying to get at is Sony made it clear that, they have made it somewhat clear at this point that they are certainly comfortable relegating certain announcements to blog posts, game announcements, platform announcements, something. I see somebody mentioning Rise of the Ronin. Yeah, true. Rise of the Ronin is a little bit further out as well. True. But I do just want to say here real quick that, I watched this new trailer for PSVR2. Did you guys see it? Sony released a new trailer for PSVR2. It came out earlier in the week, and it was really good. It was a really good trailer, but what kind of struck me about it a little bit, and what kind of stood out to me was I'm watching this trailer and I'm like, is it just me? Or does this seem like the type of trailer that Sony would show at a showcase focused on this hardware? Because that's really what kind of stuck out to me. I'm like, this trailer is so good that it really just came off to me as like that this would be like a, like a massive hardware reveal trailer that that you would reserve for like a dedicated showcase. But nonetheless, it was a really, really good trailer, and I was very impressed by it. And I'm like, wow, that legitimately got me more excited for PSVR2. And if Sony keeps their marketing on that pace for this VR headset, I think they're on a good path with it. I do. And so, again, I listed out the topics to you guys that I wanted to discuss over the course of this podcast. I just wanted to make it clear, if it's not already, that those topics are not necessarily going to be in the order that I listed them. So since we are talking about a potential PlayStation showcase, what I wanted to relay to you guys, and I know that there's a little bit of frustration from some people when I mention this, but I mean, we have to talk about it, guys. We have to talk about it. Is we heard from Final Fantasy 16's producer, okay, that we can expect the next proper Final Fantasy 16 trailer in October. That's what he said. And all I'm here to say is that we have yet to see Final Fantasy 16 outside of a PlayStation show. Okay? When it comes to a new trailer, when it comes to new footage, we have yet to see that outside of a PlayStation show. And again, I'm not trying to say that I know Sony. I'm not trying to say that I know them, because I don't. Again, they're very unpredictable. All I can say is that it might seem, you see the way I have to talk about Sony now because of what they've done to me? It might seem that Sony doesn't want Final Fantasy 16 to be shown if they're not involved. Like, Sony seems to have a bit of a grip on this game with Square Enix, where, it's, if Final Fantasy 16 is ready to be shown again, it's going to be shown alongside something that PlayStation's doing. I think it's a big enough game that Sony wants that. And again, just to be clear, I'm not saying that, guys, this is evidence. This is evidence that we're getting a PlayStation showcase in October. It's not evidence of that. But it does, it should make you at least entertain the possibility that, yeah, that could be what happens, because there is truth here that the only two trailers we've received for Final Fantasy 16, one was at the PlayStation 5 Future of Gaming Showcase in June of 2020, and the second was this June, this past June, at the bigger State of Play that Sony did, where they closed it with a Final Fantasy 16 trailer. And considering Final Fantasy 16 is one of the biggest games that's going to launch in 2023, certainly one of the biggest PlayStation games, yeah, it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me that Sony would want to be sure to continue to showcase this game and show new gameplay trailers alongside their own events. Bear with me here for a minute, guys. I gotta hydrate. Alrighty. Yeah, so here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. Even if we don't get a PlayStation showcase, and actually, you know what? Before I continue, Whiskey Gaming. Sorry, buddy. I almost missed your chat here. You're saying, yeah, MBG is promoting water. Whiskey Gaming, you're saying, telling you, bro, they are bringing back PlayStation Experience in December to replace E3. And for them, it may be a new yearly event. I'm calling it. So, I'm glad you mentioned this, Whiskey Gaming, because I do think, what you're saying actually makes a lot of sense. Because I was thinking about this, dude. I was thinking about this. I was thinking to myself, well, I'm seeing quite a few people claiming that Sony's going to have an event in October. And I'm like, well, doesn't it feel like a little bit too convenient? Just a little bit, where it's like we all were convinced, including myself, maybe not everybody, but I was convinced. I was convinced that Sony's going to have an event in September. Why wouldn't they? And guys, it's September 25th. I think it's safe to say there's no proper PlayStation showcase in September. So doesn't it make just a little bit too much sense that it's like, of course it's going to be October now. But here's the thing. God of War Ragnarok is launching November 9th. Something else that I can't help but pay attention to is the fact that as of right now, we have not received a dedicated state of play for God of War Ragnarok. Now, this is quite strange. Fee Emery, you're saying, MBG, will VR plus live service equal Sony's iceberg? I worry. I don't think so. I'm going to tell you why. Do you know why even? So first of all, I don't think VR is going to equal their iceberg. I think VR, worst case scenario with VR, it fails. It fails to gain any traction. It fails to be profitable, and Sony has no choice but to basically pull a PS Vita on it, where it just slowly dies and goes away and is never talked about again by Sony. That's, I think, the worst case scenario. Honestly, I think the exact same thing can be said for Sony's live service endeavor. I know people are worried, like, is this going to be Sony's iceberg? I'm more afraid of Sony's success with live service than I am of their failure, because worst case scenario, if Sony fails with live service, they just pack it up and they go back to square one, which is, what are we doing right? What are we doing good? What are we doing that's profitable? We'll just keep doing that. We'll stick to that. But I feel like if Sony's super successful with live service, that could, again, I'm not assuming the worst. It's just a possibility. If they have an immensely successful live service game or two, it could ultimately influence them to, move some resources from what may have, resources that could have gone into a single player game, to where now they're going to move them to, we got to do more work. I don't know if you guys can hear my son, by the way. He's out there like yelling at something. So you might hear him coming through. It sounds pretty silly. I'm trying to sit here and be all serious with my talk about Sony Live Service. But I'm not saying that it's gonna, if Sony succeeds in live service, that's automatically bad news. I'm not saying that. Right now, it seems like the one good thing about Jim Ryan, I don't think it's the only good thing, but one good thing about Jim Ryan, from what I gather from him, is that he is a businessman first and foremost. Like, for him, it is about Sony's bottom line, but he doesn't seem like the type to me that's ready to dive headfirst into anything. And I think that's actually a good thing, because when you look at some of the things, it's easy to focus on live service, right? Like, look at how much Jim Ryan and Sony and Herman Hulst are talking about live service games, but we also shouldn't forget the fact that one of the things Sony is focused on, and they've talked about this with their investors, is investing literally like 50% of their resources into new IP, right? As well as already established franchises. And it's like that to me makes a lot of sense. Like they're splitting it right down the middle. And I think that you're going to kind of see that same angle probably take place with what they're doing with their single player and their live service games, where they're going to say, look, like let's invest, this percentage into live service and this percentage into what we currently do. And I think the main thing I'm trying to get at here is one should not come at the expense of the other. That's the important thing to understand here. What I mean by that is we shouldn't, theoretically, I'm not saying we won't, but what we shouldn't see is a scenario where, okay, so this live service game is succeeding and doing really well. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this, $50 million that was meant to go into this new AAA single player IP, and we're going to take that away from that, and we're going to dump it into this successful live service. It shouldn't work like that. The way it should work is Sony's like, okay, so we put this $50 million here, or this $100 million here, because $50 million seems kind of low for a big AAA game. Like, put this $100 million here for this new AAA IP from the studio. We have our live service game over here that's really successful. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take $100 million out of the revenue, out of the profit, whatever it is that we've gained from this live service game, and we're going to reinvest it back into it to hopefully make even more. Obviously, I know somebody's saying that's very optimistic, and Fiamery, you're saying that's my worry exactly, buddy. That is an optimistic outlook, but again, like I guess I'm just trying to say that it doesn't make much sense, in my opinion, for Sony to ever feel like in order to grow a successful live service game, they have to take away from their already successful single player or AAA single player endeavors. Because again, like we have to acknowledge that Sony makes a lot of profit, a lot of profit off of their successful single player games. So it's just a situation where even if they were to do that, I don't think it would be to a detrimental degree. Like I just don't see in the future Sucker Punch going to Sony and being like, all right, so for Ghost of Tsushima 3, we'll just say it's this far in the future, because many of these live service games are probably a couple years away. You know what? No, I'm thinking too far ahead. Let's just stick with Ghost of Tsushima 2. So Sucker Punch with Ghost of Tsushima 2, they've hit their budget. Okay, like they went over their budget for the game. It's massive, it's sprawling, it's as AAA as it can possibly get, but they're almost finished with it, but they're over budget. I don't see a scenario in which Sony, Sucker Punch turns to Sony and says, look, we went a little bit over budget here. We're going to need like another $25 million to really kind of get this thing into the final stretch and finish it out. I just don't see Sony being like, no, like you're going to have to cut back, or you're going to have to downscale it, or you're going to have to, I don't think they're going to do that. It's a matter of investment. And I think that the whole idea of what Sony is doing on all fronts, and this is the basic gist I get from Jim Ryan's leadership, is it's about just doubling up over time. It's about if we put this amount of money into this AAA game or this live service game, single player game, whatever it might be, live service, single player, if we put this amount of money into it, when we put it out, we would like to try to get double back. Obviously, you got to break even, get double back. This is basic business, return on investment. This is what every business is trying to achieve. But it just seems like they're kind of just, they want to keep going with that over and over again. It's not I have to go on this long-winded discussion about this because we have seen things take a turn for the worst in the past. I don't want to say that Sony is immune to it. I don't want to say that Sony would never, again, I'm not going to say they would never do this or never do that. But I have a very difficult time, guys, truly. I just have such a difficult time ever imagining Sony in a position where they are neglecting their big tentpole single player titles. I can't see that ever being a thing, because if that were to ever happen, then in my opinion, that's the day that PlayStation truly has lost its identity. But one other thing I want to mention here, because I know this is really turning into a long-winded thing here. There is something to be said for the role of single-player narrative storytelling. Okay? Single-player gameplay and narrative-driven, storytelling. There's something to be said about how that can be weaved in to a live service game, for better or for worse, because we've seen this done successfully, and I do think that there is a part of Sony where they do see a big part of their single player future. Again, I know that some people are not going to like to hear this, but I think they do believe a significant part of their single player future will lie in that. Hey, you want more Last of Us? Well, guess what? The Last of Us Online, year 3, just like Destiny, it's like we have a whole new expansion with a whole new story, a whole new cast of characters. But that's the thing, though, is that, like, even for as ideal as that may sound on paper, there's still something missing. Because when you think of Ghost of Tsushima, yeah, I played Legends. That multiplayer was awesome. And I could see a whole live service Ghost of Tsushima game being created with some, single player content that I could play alone, or with some story being told, the whole thing. But what about Jin, right? What about Jin Sakai, the main character of Ghost of Tsushima, and the whole, his friends and his family and his enemies? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that is something that I feel like you can't really weave into a live service game successfully. Hopefully what I'm saying makes sense. I don't know if I'm making as much sense as I want to, but yeah, you guys know me. I go on these extended, I don't know that this is a rant, but these extended discussions regarding Sony and their live service future. And I think right now, for me and for everybody who is a PlayStation fan, I think the best thing to do is to not make any assumptions. I know it's hard, but I wouldn't assume the best and I wouldn't assume the worst. I would say just be somewhere in the middle and just give it a chance to play out and see what happens. For me, I'm mostly in the middle, but I have made it clear before that I am kind of excited to see what Sony can do in the multiplayer space once again. I am excited to see what some of their studios can do with, a live service model. Like, what does a live service Last of Us game look like? I'm very curious, and I hope it turns out good. But, I'm just going to maintain my my composure here and just say, let's see how it plays out. And I'm not going to assume the worst. I'm not going to assume the best. By the way, guys, do me a favor. Hit that like button for me if you could. We could probably get over 300 likes if everybody contributes. Something, D-Pad Academy, you're saying, agree. We can weave some of that single-player DNA into a live service a la Legends. At the end of the day, though, the OG single-player will still need to stand on its own in perpetuity. Yeah, and that's the thing here is, I want to say, I know I keep saying that I'm going to end this, but let me just make this last statement here. I think Sony looks up to Rockstar Games to a degree. I think Sony, you see how they've always been sure to market Grand Theft Auto 5 and GTA Online. And even with Red Dead Redemption 2 and Red Dead Online, they've always been sure to market this alongside PlayStation. And I think that's because Sony sees the way that Rockstar does things. And what's just so fascinating to me is one of the things that Jim Ryan went on record saying this year, and I'm telling you, if there's anything I'm not saying we have to always keep this at the forefront of our mind. It's not that serious. But if you're ever wondering where PlayStation sees future growth, it's when Jim Ryan said clear cut that we do not believe the future of growth in this industry lies in a subscription service, a Netflix or Hulu-esque service, or something like Game Pass. Instead, where we see the future growth happening in this industry is with live service games. And he said because these live service games are like subscriptions in of themselves. And he said this at around the same time when we saw Rockstar Games announce GTA Online Plus. Some of you may have forgotten what GTA Online Plus is, or maybe you just weren't even aware of it, but it's literally a subscription inside of a live service game. So if you download GTA Online, you can subscribe for $5 or $6 a month to GTA Online Plus. And I just feel like Sony is looking at this. They're looking at that. But the important thing to pay attention to here, and I'm specifically pointing out Rockstar Games, is for as insanely successful as GTA Online is, what is attached to it? What has always been attached to it? And more importantly, and I think that if there's anything we learned with this GTA 6 leak, it will continue to be attached to it. The single player experience. And to me, the one thing I really did appreciate about the GTA 6 leak is I had a question. And that question was, well, we know GTA Online is the future for Rockstar. And GTA Online is their bread and butter. But is GTA 6 going to have a proper single player? New characters, a new story? And we got confirmation that yes, it is. It is. It's going to have a whole new single player. And that gives me a lot of hope because it goes to show that even when you have like the most successful live service game in the world in GTA Online, even though, let's face it, Rockstar has every monetary reason, not every, I don't want to take it that far, but I think people would understand, believe it or not. I don't think they would be happy, but I think they would understand if Rockstar said, we're not doing a proper single player this time. We're GTA Online all the time now. That's what we are. Our new characters will be in the world of GTA Online. They could do that. And I think people would understand. It's like, I mean, you can't argue with the numbers that, and the money they're making. But they're choosing, apparently, with this leak, to not do that. And that is just so important because it really does go to show that, like, you have to strike that balance where, if you're going to release another GTA game, it has to have a single player. It just wouldn't be GTA without it. And I'm not talking about an online, like, create your character and then meet these new characters and go explore the world and maybe do some co-op. No, I'm talking like something that's from the ground up. Like, this is meant to be played solo, and then you can go online and do everything you want there. Um, I guess I'm just saying that if Rockstar Games is still willing to do that, then I fully believe that Sony, considering I think Sony is right up there with single player, if not maybe beyond that in some areas, I think they're in the same exact boat. I do, and I think somebody at Sony is ultimately going to realize that no matter how successful we are with live service, single player can't go anywhere. And that's it. That's all I'm trying to say. Again, that was very long-winded, and I have to move on here. And I am going to move on. Also, I do just want to say that when it comes to that GTA 6 leak, there's still a lot we don't know. That's worth pointing out. Like, I don't want to say definitively that what we looked at in that leak, it's a single player GTA 6 story. I'm assuming that's what it is, but we also have to understand that this is all just leaked footage and information, and nothing has been confirmed yet. So just keep that in the back of your mind. So something else I do want to talk about here is I want to talk about Shuhei Yoshida and how we are once again seeing Sony double down on their business model. And I just can't help but find myself pretty sorry, Leia wanted to jump up here and hang out. I can't help but find myself just honestly kind of happy to hear Sony continually come out here and when we are just seeing so much, I don't want to say flack being thrown their way, but let's face it, guys. I'm going to try to not talk too much about Xbox or Game Pass because I don't think it's that relevant to this conversation, but it is relevant to the degree where Game Pass has successfully altered the expectation, I think, for a lot of people. And I think that Sony has been a little bit on the back foot because of that, where, we see what they do with PlayStation Plus Extra and Premium. And I think that it's just becoming more and more clear that Sony, look, I think people were under the impression that Sony created PlayStation Plus Extra and Premium to compete with Game Pass, but I don't think that's true at all at this point. I think that maybe, if anything, PlayStation Plus Extra and Premium were simply just created to extract more money straight up out of PlayStation Plus subscribers. And that's it. I don't think it's trying to compete with Game Pass, because if that were true, you would think that Sony would be trying harder. You would think that Sony would be talking more positively about their own service, but they're really kind of not. And I'm not saying that I'm necessarily happy for that, but I guess it's hard for me not to feel that, like, okay, Shuhei Yoshida says, look, we still believe in the premium release model. Like, that's just how we're doing things. And Shuhei Yoshida was kind of being asked, what about a game like Stray? Sony clearly paid to get Stray onto PlayStation Plus Extra as a game that they can flex as, like, hey, it's a day-and-day launch into PlayStation Plus Extra. And you would think that in Sony doing that, it creates a scenario, again, of expectation where now people are, even now Sony is conditioning people to expect that maybe more often. And I just thought it was so fascinating how Shuhei Yoshida just straight up came out and was like, "Oh no, don't expect that. That's rare." We're Stray was kind of an outlier. Like, we're not going to keep doing that. And I just think that when you listen to that, and then the next thing he says is, we still believe in the premium release model. This is where it's like, okay, all right, Sony. I think you're being I think Sony's being a little bit scattershot here, just a little bit. Like, it is weird a little, to see them come out and say, here's our new service, or our new tier for this service. And here is a day and date release, just like you see our competitors do. And so people are like, oh, okay, Sony. So you're trying to compete with Game Pass here, huh? And then literally like 2 months later, they're like, no, we're not. We still expect people to buy games. And again, like, I don't have a problem with that. I actually think that's good, because I do prefer the premium release model. But I just think it's kind of funny in a way to see them kind of dance around. But I don't know, man. Ultimately, I think Sony needs to stick with the premium release model. And I've explained many times before why I think that is. And I hope it's not all talk. I don't think it's talk. Like, I think it was important to listen to what Shuhei Yoshida had to say in this instance, because he seems like he was being pretty candid. Like, the reason why Sony's going to stick with a premium release model is because why wouldn't they? It works for them. It's what makes them money. They have conditioned their players on their platform to not expect free games, but to expect to have to pay for their games. But I think that PlayStation Plus Extra maybe offers this kind of middle ground in some cases. Like, for example, a game like Steel Rising, they just announced that they have a trial. And I don't know if you need premium for it. You might, but if we could get more stuff like that, being able to get these games that have been out for a year and a half onto PlayStation Plus Extra, there is inherent value there for people who are willing to wait, who are subscribed to this. But it just seems like it's becoming more clear over time, between the things that Jim Ryan is saying, between what Shuhei Yoshida is saying, and most importantly, what Sony is doing, that I don't think they're following Game Pass, guys. I don't. I think that a couple of months ago, when we see PlayStation Plus Extra release and we see them putting out Stray day and date, I think we immediately begin to think like, oh, okay, they are trying to compete with Game Pass here in their own way. But then they come out and they're like, we're not doing day and date releases for our AAA games. And then now Shuhei says, yeah, we're just experimenting. And I think that's all it is. I think that's all it is for Sony. It's just that. I think it's an experiment. I think Sony wants to see if we try to do or simulate here the same thing that Xbox does or something very similar. Let's do that for a month. Let's do that for 30 days and just see what happens. Let's see what the numbers tell us. Let's see what the data tells us. The telemetry. And I think that Jim Ryan, puts on his glasses and is looking at all this data and is like, yeah, this can't work for us, And so I don't know. I thought it was really interesting to kind of hear what Shuhei Yoshida had to say, because we don't get too many interviews with PlayStation executives these days. And Shuhei Yoshida has been there for a long time. He's certainly a PlayStation veteran. He knows the game better than pretty much anybody else. And so I was just really interested to hear him kind of come out and double down on that and say, yeah, we're still doing premium releases. Subscription services are experimental for us right now. And we have a Dark Demon Media member for 2 months. You're saying you're turning 29. I'm turning 35 on the 28th. Happy early birthday, brother. Well, thank you so much for that, man. And yeah, happy early birthday to you too, man. That's happening sooner than me. So All right, let me see. So I didn't really have too much to say on that topic in particular, but I did just want to kind of make that point known that I think the big takeaway here. Sorry, I'm a little bit stuffed up, guys. The big takeaway from what Shuhei Yoshida is saying is that I do believe what he's saying is true, that services right now for Sony, it's a bit experimental, and I think they're just trying different things, and they're kind of dipping their toes in the water because we have seen Sony experimenting with a lot of different things, but I think this is almost a clear sign of Sony, and I could be wrong about this, but I'm almost reading this as Sony basically coming out and saying like, hey, we're trying to do the Game Pass model to the best of our ability, and we're just finding that it's just not working for us. And I gotta admit something to you guys. I'm so confused. I don't know if I'm that confused, but I can't help but feel kind of confused about just the general approach that Sony has taken with PlayStation Plus Extra and Premium, especially Premium. Because I feel like Extra is a good deal and it makes sense, and I feel like Premium it almost feels like an afterthought for Sony, and I don't know. I mean, what is my cat? Hey, I'm gonna have to hold on. He's chewing my wire. Hey, what are you doing, man? Oh, these cats are gonna be the death of me, I swear. Yeah. He's chewing my wire over there. I'm gonna have to get up. Here we go. Knock it off, bro. I'm right here. This cat's gonna make me get up. I'm over here trying to I tried to scare him away from it, but he's still going in. He's still going in. Magnum Visuals, you're saying Sony can probably do every other AAA game into PlayStation Plus or selected ones and offset the cost with their live service games. Every other AAA game into PlayStation Plus. I mean, yeah, that could be a possibility, but again, I don't think they'll ever do that. I don't, because I feel like Sony, they are trying to get the best of both worlds, where it's like, well, if we can still sell our games at full price at release, have our live service recurrent revenue, and then also get our recurring revenue from PlayStation Plus Extra without having to do day and date, then I think we're good. All right, I got to get this cat. All right, man, I warned you. Get out. Come on. Go. Come on, you too. All right, sorry about that, guys. He really he was testing me there. He wasn't budging. Or let the cat be on the camera instead. He was on the camera for a little while. He was just chilling in the back. Yeah, he got real scared when I walked over. He's like, "Uh-oh. Busted." But anyway, yeah, so that's what Shuhei Yoshida had to say about, about premium game releases, and we'll see. I'll continue to update you guys anytime we get interviews with any PlayStation executives and they're asked about this. It'll be interesting to see if their tune kind of changes over time or if they continue to stick with this. But Jim Ryan said it, Herman Hulst said it. Now we have Shuhei Yoshida saying it. There are some people that are completely convinced that Sony's going to do this or Sony's going to do that, and I'm like, well, I understand where the speculation comes from, but I'm not fully convinced. All right, now another topic, and I'm gonna let you guys know now. Let me see. We are about 2.5 hours in this podcast. There's no chance that this podcast is going to be like a normal Yeah, I know it's normal, but a normal 4 hour episode. I don't know if it's coming through or not, but I have been sick the past couple days, and I'm still recovering here. Like I can still feel it. Uh, I'm like, I don't know, just feeling very clammy. So I'm probably gonna have to end this episode a little bit earlier than normal. So hopefully you guys understand. But I still wanted to make sure to try to have a stream here for you guys. Saying look a little rough, MBG. Yeah, I've been feeling it the past couple days. Yeah, I think I had like a fever last night. I woke up. I woke up so drenched in sweat. It was crazy. Like I actually thought somebody poured water on me. I was like, what is going on right now? It was insane. But yeah, that's the thing with the change of the weather. It it seems to happen every year. So appreciate you guys wishing me well. But yeah, I'm already starting to feel it, kind of like, you know, because I was beginning to wonder, like, am I going to have to cancel the podcast for today? And I really wanted to make sure not to, just because I feel like I've been on a roll with it. You know, do I have the Rona? It might be. It could be COVID. Um, I mean, could be that. Could be the flu. Uh, but yeah, it's been kind of rough. Just trying to push through it. But yeah, I feel like I've had a um pretty good thing going with my podcast here. I haven't had to miss any episodes, and I really wanted to try to be sure to keep it going. So I figured, even if it's just like a shorter podcast, I think it's okay though, because like as we established earlier, there really wasn't. It works out because there wasn't a whole lot going on this week. Like it would have really sucked if Sony had their showcase this week or something, and I was, sick like I am, and it's like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to, you know, not gonna be able to keep on top of it the way I want it to. But anyway, I do want to move on to another topic. And again, most of these topics are likely going to be brief because there's really just not too much to extract from them, unfortunately. But let's talk about this 2023 PlayStation 5 model, because there's some confusion surrounding it. So just to give you some context, pretty much what's happening here is we have Tom Henderson, who is a very reliable insider, probably one of the industry's most reliable insiders. And do we have a Fiammer? You're saying, I missed last week, 53 on the 18th. Am I the oldest here? I don't know. I mean, somebody will have to chime in. Somebody will have to chime in to let you know. But appreciate you letting us know there. Yeah, I mean, a lot of September birthdays. So happy belated birthday. But yeah, there's a revised PS5 model that's coming out in 2023, according to Tom Henderson. And what's really interesting about this model is what Sony's looking to do is create a console with a detachable disk drive. And the reason why they want to do this is because, well, right now they have two consoles they're producing. PlayStation 5 model with a disk drive, one without it, the digital model. And it's pretty clear that they want to streamline production going forward, starting in 2023, considering it's probably going to be a peak year, 2023 going into 2024. I think between September 2023 and the end of 2024, that could be a peak year for the PS5 in particular. They just want to have one model that they're producing, and this seems to be the way they want to go about it. A lot of people are buying digital games these days, and it's kind of understandable why they would choose, like, our base model is just going to be digital, but they're also, they're making it so that, look, this is our solution. And it makes a lot of sense if you think about it, Like if you don't have to produce two separate models, you could just produce one that's digital and it has a spot where you just plug in the disk drive. I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? I guess I'm assuming that this means that come September 2023, when this console comes out, I think it's looking like it's going to be $400. Like the new price for the PS5 is just going to be a flat $400, and anybody who's going to pay more is just going to be buying the disc drive, possibly separately. Mark Tech, you're saying PS Plus Extra offers a convenient way to play older and some new games without actively searching and paying for them. Well worth the extra $40 per year. I agree. Like, I don't know that I'm going to stay subscribed to PlayStation Plus Extra, only because I just don't really use it that much. Like I have my own system of kind of sorting through games and knowing what I want to play. But the value is definitely there, man. That's for sure. The value is certainly there. And I think a lot of people probably, I've seen a lot of people, I know for a fact, a lot of people have talked very positively about PlayStation Plus Extra, more so than Premium. And I think PlayStation Plus Extra is the tier we want to pay attention to going forward, seeing what Sony plans to do with it. But I think they've made it pretty clear, just like you're saying, convenient way to play older games, and also finding some new games. Yeah. So I think it was a smart move by Sony. But I think the smartest move is them choosing not to do day and date, only because, I don't know, man. It would be very interesting to see what would happen to their games if they did that. So thank you for that. But yeah, I mean, I do think that it makes sense for Sony to be doing this, because it will streamline production. It'll make it easier for them to produce more models, and I think it's going to ultimately produce a really good look for the PS5. I think it's going to be a slim model, and I think it's only going to be $400. And I think Sony's going to have the advantage to be able to come out and say that the new price of the PS5 is $400. And I think that the majority of people who buy a PS5 are just going to buy it. They're not even going to realize it's digital only, and I don't think they're going to care. But anybody who does, they'll be able to just buy the disc drive and detach it. And even people who are advocating for physical media, I've even seen a lot of people saying that they think this is a good thing. Like, this is actually better. And I agree. I don't think disc drives fail all that often, but just the fact that, if something does happen, you can just simply replace it. But I've also seen a lot of people, say that they hope Microsoft does something similar with the Xbox Series S down the line, where they offer an option. So, at this point, I think I'm just curious to know, what's this console going to look like? And, how is it going to be marketed? Because that, to me, is the really interesting thing here. Like, I want to know how this console is going to be marketed. What's the pricing going to be? How much is the disc drive going to be? I'm assuming it'll be $100, something like that. You're saying, MBG, if it's a cheapo drive, it can be an issue. Well, you would hope that it wouldn't be, right? I mean, I'm assuming it's going to be $100. And if they're going to charge $100 for a disc drive attachment, it better be a quality one. Because there's, I know for a fact, like, Sony's going to make a profit off of a disc drive attachment. They're going to find a way to try to make a profit off it anyway. So, saying only issue is if they stop producing the drives. Yeah, I don't think that would be in Sony's best interest, though. And, this makes me think that this is the exact thing they want to do for the PlayStation 6. I think Sony for the PlayStation 6 is going to show, they're going to announce this console years from now, and it's going to be a digital console, and it's going to be the same thing where it's like, we have an attachment for the disc drive. And what's actually cool, if you think about it, is what we could end up seeing here is a situation where if you buy a PlayStation 5, if you're like a first-time PS5 buyer, you're like, oh, I secured a PS5. It's a digital slim unit. digital only, maybe you wait a year. And a year later, you're like, you know what? I do want to start buying some games physically, or I just want to have that option. You could buy the attachment a year later, and just add it on, and boom, now you can play any physical media. And what's also cool to think is that when Sony announces the PlayStation 6, this will make it so that they can automatically launch the PlayStation 6 at a lower price point. And anybody who already has one of these detachable disk drives, you could probably just take it off your PS5 and put it right into the PlayStation 6, And that, if you think about that, that's actually really cool, because you're essentially buying the new console and you're not paying for another disk drive, assuming you're just paying for the console and the components, and then boom, if you already have a disk drive, just detach it. It's interesting. I think that this is a really interesting and smart way for Sony to go about this. Saying sounds too good to be true. Well, something we do have to point out here is this is a insider report. Granted, Tom Henderson has been, his track record has been impeccable when it comes to most things, but especially PlayStation. He's been on point. So the one thing I will say is he's saying that this is what they're looking into now. I do believe that things could potentially go wrong, or things could change. And, ultimately this report could prove to be incorrect or inaccurate due to the just time period between, this console apparently isn't going to be launching until a year from now. So, I think at this point, I'm just wondering. I'm wondering just what the form factor is going to look like. How much, if it's going to be a slim, like how much slimmer will it be? And something else that's worth noting is he claims in his report, he claims that this disk drive attachment is going to be done in such a way where you're not going to notice it. Like, it's not, if you buy a PS5 and you set it up without the disk drive attachment, it's not going to look like there's a big chunk of the console missing. But it's also going to be so that if you attach the disk drive to it, it's not going to look like it's just sticking out. It's still going to be very aesthetic. So that's also really interesting to me. It makes me wonder, like, could it be maybe on the side of the console? Like, there will maybe just be like a little, like a flap or something that can open up, and you basically just slide the disk drive attachment into it. And so you like insert the disk to the side, something like that. There's a bunch of different ways it could be done, but I'm interested. I'm very interested, because to me this sounds like something that could really, I think, kind of pleasantly surprise people. Axis Hawk, you're saying Tom Henderson has a flawless track record. Yeah, Tom Henderson, you got to give the guy a lot of credit. He has proven that when it comes to having inside information, yeah, he's the real deal. And I think he just created his own website called Insider Gaming, which is a website probably worth paying attention to, since, he'll probably be dropping like exclusive info on different things there. So yeah, we got a lot of, if you think about it, we have a lot of really interesting things happening with PlayStation on the hardware front. We have the DualSense Edge controller, we have the PSVR2 headset and the controllers, and now we're also hearing that there's going to be look, it's not like it will be a surprise that a new PlayStation 5 model is announced in 2023. It's, it's expected. We're all expecting a slim, but just for them to kind of change it up in this way, it's exciting. I think it's exciting because I don't know. At this point, I'm just interested to hear about any of Sony's plans going forward. Because outside of God of War, outside of Final Fantasy 16, and even Spider-Man 2, we're very much in the dark about what the future of PlayStation looks like exactly. Um, so yeah, that's for that topic. That's pretty much all I have to say. I can't really go much deeper than that. Let me see if there's anything else I missed here. Yeah, so something. Wait, I thought. Wow. Okay, she's still in here. I thought I kicked you out too. I guess not. She's still here. Um. So yeah, one of the final topics I just wanted to briefly touch on here. And this might be the last topic. I don't know that I'm going to be able to get to every single topic. I'm really starting to feel the fatigue begin to set in. But this is something I wanted to be sure to talk about because I just I have to. All right, so I'm sure many of you have been following the whole situation regarding Activision Blizzard, Call of Duty, and the kind of back and forth between Sony and Microsoft. And the most recent thing that happened is Microsoft's CEO was asked about the increased scrutiny because right now the CMA, which is the UK's regulatory body, they are, they're investigating this acquisition very deeply, and you can tell that Sony is trying to make this as difficult as possible for Microsoft by coming out here and basically being like, we don't think this is a good idea. This could hurt us. This could disrupt everything, and the whole thing. And obviously, it makes Sony look a certain way. But Microsoft's CEO, in response to being asked about this, well, first of all, he said that they're very, very confident that it's going to go through. He also said that it's normal, for an acquisition of this size to go through increased scrutiny. But then he proceeded to just kind of call out Sony, and this really kind of bothered me, not because of what he's saying, because it's like, I mean, look, he's Microsoft CEO. Just like I said, Jim Ryan, he's out here saying what he has to say, regardless of how hypocritical it may seem or how ridiculous it may look, because it's his job to do so. The same exact thing can be said for Microsoft's CEO. He basically called out Sony and said, look, depending on how you look at it, we're number 4, number 5 in the gaming industry. Sony's number 1. And Sony just made, 3 acquisitions of their own in this same period? And he said, so if this is about competition, then let us compete. And again, it's not what he's saying that is strange to me. It's the way I'm seeing people react to what he's saying that is kind of really putting me off here. Because, again, if you're Microsoft CEO, that's what you're going to do. You're going to try to make it seem like the Activision Blizzard deal is not a big deal at all. And, you're just making one acquisition. Look at Sony. Sony's number 1. Look at how big they are in gaming. They're making their own acquisitions and nobody seems to care. And it's like, okay, yeah, again, you have to do this because it's your job, but I expect better from people. I don't know why I expect better from people. You would think by this point in time, I would know not to expect better from people. But when I'm seeing people kind of parade what Microsoft CEO is saying around and acting as if like, yeah, like let them compete. Like, come on, Sony's number 1. Like, Microsoft has every, this is the same thing. Like, this is where we are reaching truly a new level of insincerity that I don't know that I can partake in. Because if we are going to, honestly, if all of us are going to, metaphorically speaking, sit down at the table, okay, we're all going to sit down at the table and we're going to look each other in the eye and we're going to say, you know what? I think he's right. I think that Sony acquiring Haven Studio, Sony acquiring Savage Game Studios, and Sony acquiring Bungie that if Sony can acquire these three companies and no one bats an eye and everybody's just fine with that, but Microsoft wants to acquire the entirety of Activision Blizzard and all of their IP, yeah, that's fair. That's the same thing. It's all fair game. If that's really where we are at right now, then here's the thing. I can play that game too. It's actually not difficult for me to do so, only because it's like, look, I'm not Sony. I'm not, I'm not the one that has to worry about necessarily my platform losing games potentially, because worst case scenario, I can go over to Xbox. I can play Xbox through my PC, or any games that Microsoft has. So if we want to do this scenario now where, okay, so Sony started this because they made this game exclusive and they paid for exclusive rights for this game, and they made Spider-Man exclusive. Okay. All right. So that's going to elicit a response from Microsoft. So Microsoft's response is now going to be, well, all right, we have to buy our own stuff now. So we're going to compete on a level that we haven't before by buying publishers. And to kind of, I just want to simplify this picture just so we have a clear understanding of what we're looking at. And it's, I feel like we're just treading the same ground, but I just want to try to make a clear stance at this point, because it's clear that this is not going to stop. And that's the thing I have to emphasize with this, is it's clear that, Microsoft, they're going to keep pushing. Sony's going to keep pushing. That's just how it's going to be until this deal is done. And whether it ends and it got blocked, or it ends and it went through, this is what's going to happen. So I'm going to try to paint this picture as clearly as I can. For pretty much the entirety of the modern console business and market, with, the main three, Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft, they've all been kind of operating on the same level. Okay. And to claim that they have not been operating on the same level is just a lie. It's not true. There's no argument to be made. It's false. The fact of the matter is Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft have all been operating on the same level and on the same scale within the established console market. And within that established console market emerged a leader. And granted, it shifts. There was a time when, nobody thought that Sony was going to be able to compete with Nintendo, and they were proven wrong. And then there was a time where some, people thought that Microsoft wasn't going to stand a chance. And then look at what they did with the 360. So, it has kind of always fluctuated, and that's normal. That's how competitive markets work. And what happened over this course is, at some point, Microsoft could no longer keep up with the competition, and they pretty much got, I'm not saying it's because Sony stomped on them so hard, or because Nintendo beat them up. That's part of it, but it's also because of their own mistakes. It's like just what we saw with PlayStation with the PS3. It's, you can't say that the 360 beat the living crap out of the PS3, because that's not the entire picture. What happened is Sony beat the crap out of themselves with the PS3, and then it just made it that much easier for Xbox to just kind of finish the job at the time. You know what I mean? That's exactly what we saw happen with Microsoft and the Xbox One, where they basically imploded on themselves. And it just, all Sony had to do was just like, okay, here's our console. It's just for games. So if you like games, buy our console. Oh, and we support discs and offline play. And that's like literally all Sony had to do, and it was over for Microsoft. And I think Microsoft knew that. And so what happened is, where the shift comes in is when Phil Spencer told Satya Nadella, look, I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't cancel the Xbox division, why you shouldn't sell off the Xbox division. And this was his plan, and he laid it out to Satya Nadella. From that moment forward, Microsoft, they changed the game. And they decided that, you know what, we're gonna win this the only way we know how. And I can't fault Microsoft, because it's worked for them. Microsoft didn't get to be as big as they are by losing. They get to be as big as they are by winning and knowing how to dominate markets and knowing how to destroy competition. And I just think it's comical to me how, people make it sound like, stop defending Sony, they would do the same thing. Like, let's make something clear here, guys. Competition is competition. No matter what the scale is or the scope of it is, competition is competition. These businesses, both Sony and Microsoft, even though they are on different scales right now, they both want the same thing, which is, we want to destroy the competition. So that way we can win and we can make the most money and we can be dominant and we can make the most profit, And it is difficult, and I understand this. Like, it is difficult to feel bad for Sony when you know that deep down, if Sony was a multi-trillion-dollar company, they would be doing the same thing. So I won't deny that. I'm not here to say that if Sony wasn't a multi-trillion-dollar company, or if they were, that they wouldn't be doing this. I'm not here to say that, because that's just not true. God knows what Sony would be doing if they had the type of money to throw around that Microsoft did. But what I am here to say is that you have to be able, like, and this is just what's so, I feel like people are doing it just to troll. Like, there's no way people can't see this. I think they just don't, either they don't care, or they just are trolling. You have to be able to see the hypocrisy. Like, if you can look at Sony and see Jim Ryan complaining about Call of Duty being exclusive to Xbox potentially, and you can turn to Sony and to every Sony fan and say, you guys see the hypocrisy, right? How Sony is all about exclusives until one day it's working against them. Exclusivity is all good until one day the exclusivity is working against you. Yes, okay, that you can see the hypocrisy there. And that's why people don't feel sorry for Sony, because like, Sony, you made your bed here, Sony. You made your bed, and your bed is made up of exclusivity all day, every day, anywhere you can get it, right? But the difference is, Sony's bed is not made up of exclusivity on that scale, and it never has been, and it never will be, because it can't. And if you can identify that hypocrisy, then surely you should also be able, as a rational human being, to identify the hypocrisy in one day Phil Spencer kind of pushing Sony and Nintendo to the side, saying, we don't really see Sony as our competition anymore, nor Nintendo. We're more worried and concerned about the likes of Amazon of Google, of Tencent, of Facebook, right? If you can see the hypocrisy on one side, you should be able to identify the hypocrisy on the other side, because Microsoft comes out, Phil Spencer comes out, wants to downplay Sony's success, wants to downplay Nintendo's success, wants to basically make it seem like they're above them because they're a bigger company. They're a multi-trillion-dollar company. And say that we're not really worried about them. They're not our competition. To then, not too long after, when you're trying to push through a $68 billion acquisition of one of the biggest video game companies in the entire world, and this is when you decide that Sony's your competition now, right? When you have to, like, you have to be able to identify the blatant hypocrisy and the talking out of both sides of the mouths here, or of the mouth here. And this is why I try to explain to people, like, don't cheer on at this point. Do not cheer on Microsoft. Do not cheer on Sony. I think at this point, it's like, guys, this is some petty stuff here. Okay? It's petty stuff where if you see people defending Sony and saying Sony is the victim, Sony's getting a bad deal here, they're getting, they're getting an unfair shake here. Like, you need to take a step back. Sony doesn't need to be defended. Sony doesn't care about you defending them. Sony only cares about whether or not they're going to be able to remain the market leader, and that's it. And they're going to do what they have to do to try to keep that spot. But if you are also out here cheering on Microsoft and advocating like, oh, damn, look at that, Microsoft CEO throwing shade at Sony. Like, are you kidding me? Throwing shade at Sony? Like, do you hear yourself? You're sitting here literally puffing up the CEO of a multi-trillion-dollar company who is literally trying to forcefully change what the gaming industry is from a business model standpoint. I'm not here to say that that's good or bad. I'm here to say, please don't do that. Please don't pump up a CEO of a multi-trillion-dollar company who is literally just saying what his lawyers deemed necessary for him to say in the moment. Because it's just a bad look, man. It's just a bad look. And it's just bizarre to me, man, where, I feel like it started with what were deemed the console wars, right? Like, it started with the console wars, and it was all about the resolutions and who has the better controller and who has the better exclusives and who has the better UI and the better this and the better that. And it has just completely transcended to another level where it's like, this is no longer about console wars. This is literally about this is like corporate wars here. And it's like, I got to draw the line in the sand somewhere where it's like, I can't keep playing these games with people where I understand that when you're rooting for your home team or what you consider your home team, I understand when you're rooting for your home team, and the team that you support, you're going to be willing to move the goalposts from time to time. Anybody who's a big fan of something, you've probably done it before. We see it happen all the time. But there just comes a point where it's like, how far are we going to take this now, guys? Like I've literally seen people coming out and just taking a massive dump on Jim Ryan. Taking just the biggest dump on Jim Ryan for him doing what he's supposed to do as the CEO of PlayStation, by trying to convince regulators that this is a mistake, that this could potentially be bad. And they came out like hyenas with their fangs out and the whole thing, where they just tore Jim Ryan to shreds, bro. Mercilessly. I'm laughing because I'm visualizing this analogy. And then the very next week, they are literally out here defending the CEO of the other company who's doing the exact same thing, who is being just as hypocritical and saying that what they're doing is right and okay. And I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I just can't do this anymore because this is what people have deemed okay. And I am bowing out, man. Like, I am bowing out. I don't care anymore about who's right or who's wrong because no one else seems to care. Because that's the thing is it doesn't matter to us. It doesn't matter to these people online. It doesn't even matter to these CEOs. You know, it's like, could you imagine like Jim Ryan at the end of the day, like going on his phone on YouTube and searching it, like trying to find like YouTubers or comments or threads that are like defending him and Sony, or Satya Nadella doing the same thing. It's like, guys, business is business. And you know how the saying goes, all is fair in love and war. And let's face it, when it comes to business, it is war, man. It is war. Business is cutthroat. Business is about one thing and one thing only, and that is succeeding, dominating, being number one, being the best. And all of those things, in terms of competition, it's war. And so all is fair. And, I've sat here and I've made the argument before where I'm like, I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair to put the Activision Blizzard acquisition on the same level as some of the acquisitions that Sony has made, because Sony has not made any acquisitions on the level of Microsoft. And when I have stated this, when I've made these statements and I've said these things, a lot of people would come out and they would say, MBG, it doesn't matter. Like, it is fair. It is fair. And it's okay. And I realized that, you know what? There's no winning here. There's no winning. And that's the point. There's no winning. Because the lines in the sand have been drawn. And so my final I guess statement on this for now, because we'll see, who knows, maybe this upcoming week Jim Ryan's going to be like, Jim Ryan just had enough and he's going to come out and be like, you know what, Microsoft, you're a bitch. Like Jim Ryan's just going to come out and not even a PR statement. It's just going to come out, go live on PlayStation's YouTube channel and just straight up call out Microsoft. That would be great. That would be the greatest thing to ever happen. But my final statement on this is this. I am certain. My cat really is itching to get out, so I'm going to end it here. I can say this with the utmost certainty. For the longest time, PlayStation has been on top. PlayStation still is on top. Okay? PlayStation for a long time has been number one, and they've been dominant in a lot of different ways in a lot of different areas. One thing I recall pretty clearly, and I think you guys, again, let's cut through all the bullshit here. I think you guys can agree with me. One thing that I saw a lot was there was a lot of cheering on of the death. It was clearly a slow, painful death for Xbox. People were cheering it on. A lot of people were cheering it on. A lot of people were dogpiling and they were kicking Microsoft when they were down, and I don't blame them. I don't blame them. You know, if you're a fan of PlayStation and you think PlayStation is the best and you want to see them win, and you have an axe to grind with Xbox, you see Xbox fall, you see Xbox, you know, just completely shoot themselves in the foot. You're going to go in and you're going to get a couple jabs in yourself. You're going to be there. I just don't want to sit here and pretend that wasn't a thing, because it was. And now that Microsoft has gotten back up and they've said, okay, we can't beat Sony. We can't even compete with Sony on this level. So we have to go to another level. And we're going to make it so that Sony can't compete. I'm not going to sit here and make it seem like Sony is some kind of innocent, fragile company that didn't know what they were doing or who they were messing with. And I'm also not going to sit here and give credit to Microsoft as if this is the most dignified way to go about it. Because that's the thing here, is there's no dignity, and we need to stop pretending that there is. Sony had no dignity when they made that video of Shuhei Yoshida handing a disc to Adam Boyes saying, "This is how you share games." They knew exactly what they were doing. They were absolutely curb stomping Microsoft when they were at their worst point, and they were ruthless. And they knew it. There's no dignity there. Just like, I see somebody saying, I missed the spicy Sony. I mean, don't get me wrong. That's amazing entertainment. And that's memorable stuff. But there's no dignity there. Just like there's no dignity right now by Microsoft deciding, well, we know how we're going to get you, Sony. Sure, Activision, we'll buy you. Oh, and you too, Bethesda. Come on. Starfield, that's ours now. There's no dignity here. So the whole point I'm trying to get at is it's war. It's war, people. It's business. And in this business, it's war. And so everything's fair game. As far as I'm concerned with what's going down right now, I'm not gonna advocate for Sony. I'm not gonna advocate by saying, Sony, you need to try to block this, and you need to, like, Sony, do what you got to do. The only thing I'm going to advocate for when it comes to Sony is, Sony, just please make your games as best you can and do the best you can for your players. That's all I'm going to advocate for. And when it comes to Microsoft, I'm not going to advocate for them to stop doing what they're doing. And I'm not going to advocate for them to do what they're doing in a better way, because it's fruitless and it's pointless. The only thing I'm going to say is that this is war and it's all free game now, man. Microsoft raised the stakes, so I challenge Sony to try to meet them in any way they can. And this is where Sony, this is where I don't want to also sit here and act like Sony doesn't know how to play the game either. You know, let's not fool ourselves here. Let's not make it seem like Sony isn't as cutthroat and as savvy as it gets when it comes to finding creative ways to create your own advantages. And just basically being strategic. This is what Sony does best. And so, if anything, at this point, rather than pushing against Microsoft and complaining about Microsoft, I'm just going to look at Sony. I'm going to say, Sony, Microsoft has raised the stakes here. And I know that you don't have the resources, the money to be able to meet them or to match them. Microsoft knows this, and that's how they're going to win this. So I challenge Sony, find your own way. Get even more strategic about it. Get even more cutthroat. Do what you got to do. Do what you've always done best. Because now you have a competitor that is they're completely over your head. So what do you do? And that's where I'm at with this. That was a lot more long-winded than I anticipated it being. But Scatrick, you're saying Sony just needs to buy 2 IPs, Silent Hill and Metal Gear. Can't believe Konami didn't even acknowledge Silent Hill 2's anniversary yesterday. I know, right? Like, it's it's painful, man. It's painful. I do agree though. Like, I would love to see what Sony could do with the Silent Hill and Metal Gear IP. I would trust them with those 2 IP in particular. I don't know that it'll ever happen though. Konami will never let go of it. I see somebody in my chat. They say, "Damn, he's still talking." LOL, bro. Yeah, this is the norm for me. I'll talk for 4 hours straight on this podcast. That's how it is. Jerry A, you're saying Xbox pumping up Microsoft's purchase power instead of game development. This is what happens when you have no games. Well, see, that's the thing. That's why it's like but here's what you have to understand, Jerry A, is like we have reached a crossroads. We've reached a point, right, where people want this though. Don't you understand that whatever it is that Microsoft is pushing for, and whatever it is that they are just really kind of going all in on, they're gaining a lot of backing. And it doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what the potential pitfalls could be. It doesn't matter what the potential benefits could be. Truly, it doesn't matter what the long-term damage or long-term benefits could be, because people are just in it right now. And they're like, you know what? This is Microsoft now. This is Xbox now. And this is what it is. And we're all for it. And it's why I've said to you, man, like I've sat here and I've expressed how I am just kind of confused as to how Xbox as a brand, as a gaming platform, can go an entire 12 months without a single release from any of their studios. And you would think people would be frustrated. You would think people would be maybe even angry or upset or maybe a little bit depressed, but they're not. And that's what's just so crazy to me, is I'm like, this is a losing. There's no reason for me to even observe this anymore, because they're not angry. They're not upset. Instead, they're talking about Microsoft CEO throwing shade and pumping up this acquisition still, and pumping up next year and the games that are coming next year. And maybe they're right. Maybe next year will be insane. It's absolutely pouring outside right now, guys. Like, absolutely storming. So, I don't know. It's looking pretty dire out there. So if I just suddenly go offline, you'll know why. But and here's the thing. Like, I'm not trying to make it seem like I have a problem with Xbox or Xbox players or the Xbox leadership. Or, in fact, everything I'm saying right now is just making it clear that I don't have a problem with it. Like, I have had problems with it, but I don't anymore, because I realize that people have just unanimously decided that this is okay. And that doesn't mean that I have to be a part of that. And that's all this comes down to is, people who are buying Xboxes, people who are subscribed to Game Pass, and people who are looking forward to their games, and people who are kind of encouraging these, massive acquisitions, and this is what gets them excited. That's okay. I'm not here to tell somebody what they should or shouldn't be excited about, or what they shouldn't or shouldn't like. I'm just saying that I've identified that I don't have to be a part of that, and it's futile and it's pointless for me to keep kind of dissecting this and pointing out, like, guys, like, that you shouldn't do this, or we should stop that. And I'm just disconnected from it at this point, where it's like, I can't say that if PlayStation was in the same position right now, if PlayStation didn't release a game at all this year, and they didn't have any games coming this year, and I had to basically wait till next year, and they're out here making big acquisitions. I mean, truthfully speaking, yeah, I would probably be hyping up that acquisition as well, because it's really, it's really all I would have to be able to hype up. And I get it. I know that people are going to read this the wrong way. They're going to take this as me throwing my own shade towards Xbox and Microsoft, but I'm not. It's just after I really mean this, like after I saw Microsoft CEO say this, after coming off of what Jim Ryan said, I just knew in that moment, like, I'm tapped out, bro. Like I humbly and respectfully bow out of the Microsoft conversation. And I will obviously have to continue to talk about Microsoft and the Xbox brand when it makes sense to do so. Like there are going to be things that happen with Xbox that are very relevant to PlayStation. That's why I'm talking about it now. Because look, Microsoft CEO straight up was like, Sony's number one. Sony's number one. And this is where you kind of have to look at Sony, and it's like, if you were to I do wonder, like, if I were to interview Jim Ryan or get one question, I would ask him, I'd be like, hey Jim, question. So Satya Nadella of Microsoft says that you, not you, Jim, but Sony, your company is number one in gaming. What is your response to that? And I just seriously do wonder, like, what does Sony say? That if there's one question I have, it's just that question and that question alone. Because Sony, what are they going to say? You're not number one? Are you going to say you're not going to be number one for long? Are you going to say that Microsoft's going to be number one by buying everyone? What do you say? He wouldn't answer, obviously. Well, and exactly, and that's why you have to kind of laugh at all of this, because it's just a game of corporate PR chess, and Sony's playing their pieces and they're making their moves, and you're seeing Microsoft do the same thing, and that's why now more than ever. Now more than ever, I'm just ready to kind of like, all right, look, can we just please get the announcement? And I'm at this point where, like, I would just love to get the announcement that the acquisition went through, and that's that. And we could just move on, because I'm ready for Sony to stop talking about this. I'm ready for Microsoft to stop talking about it. I'm ready for Xbox fans to be excited to get their Activision Blizzard games through Game Pass, and I'm ready for Sony to just kind of focus on what, in my opinion, they need to be focusing on now more than ever, which is just focus on your own stuff, focus on doing the best you can do with what you have, and that's what your players will gravitate towards, So again, I fully expect Sony to continue to do what they have to do, make the statements they have to make, and so will Microsoft, but this is where we are, and I think everybody's getting a little bit tired of it. Space Gambler Jr. says it well. I'm on the side that makes great games. Well, there you go. Axis Hawker saying, MBG, why did you change your banner, PFP, and thumbnail? I don't know. I just felt sometimes I experiment with some different things. I'm sure you guys see me do it frequently. I experiment with different thumbnail styles. I experiment with different branding. In this case, I just felt the need to simplify, excuse me. And that's what I was looking to do. You're saying the new font looks generic. Yeah, maybe that's true. But again, it all comes down to simplification. That's kind of my goal right now. And I might change it again. You never know with me. Anybody who's been following me since the earliest days, that I am a little bit neurotic when it comes to that type of stuff. I'm curious how many people have been with me since the absolute earliest days where, dude, I was like changing my profile picture on a like, I don't know if it was a daily basis, but like every 3 days to different things. I have to imagine there's at least some people here who are there for that. You're saying it makes it hard to recognize your videos when the thumbnail styles change. Yeah, I understand that. That's why, every decision I make with it, I'm not doing it with the intent of like, oh, I'm going to change it again and again. Like, I'm not going in with that mentality. I'm going in with the mentality that I would hope to stick with this. And so I have a new style that's out now, and I want to see how people take to it, you know? And if it goes well, I'll stick to it, and I want to stick to it. If not, I may have to change it again. But I'm not doing it to purposely confuse people, so don't worry. You're saying you kind of missed the blue. The blue's there. There's blue here. There's blue here. Halo Craig says, I was here when you were a big Xbox fan. If that's true, then you've been here for a long time. Needs more green. Yeah. All right. Let me keep this going here. We got Capono 5150 saying, how do you save tons of money to market the biggest game in development? You roll out some leaks and blame a miner and a messaging app called Slack. That dude, I don't know, man. That's so that is so conspiratorial. There's no chance. No chance. There's no chance that there's any truth to that, Capono. The GTA 6 leak was not intentional. It definitely wasn't. How do you save tons of... I just think that's so funny, though, that it's like, that's the idea. That's the idea behind the GTA 6 leak, is Rockstar didn't want to have to pay for marketing. No, there's no way, because here's the thing about GTA 6. GTA 6 is so massive, dude, that just the Grand Theft Auto name, it markets itself. They wouldn't have to do barely anything. It markets itself, man. So, but yeah, you could argue that a lot of people. It's interesting because I saw a lot of people saying that they actually liked the leaks, and they didn't, like, got them more excited for the game. And I've seen a lot of people saying that the leaks were harmful, and it's interesting because you do have to start to wonder how much of this is just an echo chamber, you know, like, because how many millions of people may have seen those leaks and were actually like, oh, this is awesome, GTA 6, you know, versus how many of those people were like, well, my hype's gone. I'm not interested in this game. That looks terrible. Like, I feel like that's just not really most people. I feel like it's just such a small echo chamber. And I feel like what happens is, I do think there is such a thing as being too connected. And when you're too connected, I feel like those small little echo chambers to you seem like the vocal majority. But in reality, it's like, there's no majority here. Trust me, there isn't. So you're saying, MBG, I was surprised how many devs came to the defense of Rockstar. And that's what's weird to me, is that, like, I think that's cool. Like, it's cool to see them kind of come together like that and defend Rockstar. But it's like, do they really need to be defended like that? Again, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but is it like, it's Rockstar? Like, I just don't understand. Like, I said with those GTA 6 leaks that, yeah, it looks underwhelming because it's pre-alpha, like, game developer, like, footage we're looking at. We're not supposed to see this. So obviously it's going to look underwhelming, because this is not at all what the final product's going to look like. Not even close. So you can't judge it. But that doesn't mean we can't call it underwhelming, because it's supposed to look underwhelming. You know, no in-development footage looks great. And I think that that's the point that developers were trying to prove. But it's like, I would seriously have to question like these people who make it seem like, oh my God. And again, there's not many, but we live in a day and age where you see all the time, like the clips and the videos, and actually Disney just releases that, or Marvel just releases it straight up on Disney Plus, like the making of these movies and how underwhelming it looks compared to the final product. And you don't see people being like, well, I'm less excited now than I was before because now I know how much green screen. It's like I think people are smart enough to know that when you see how something's being made, it's just not what the final product's going to look like. It's going to look a lot worse. And I just think it's bizarre that people are treating others like because one internet troll decides to say, well, that looks terrible. You should be able to know at this point that they're just trolling. Like, they don't really mean that. Like, of course they're, nobody's that dumb, nobody, like, unless you're like really truly brand new to gaming and you have no clue. And that's your first time ever seeing what behind the scenes, pre-alpha gameplay looks like. If it's your first ever time seeing that, I can understand how it would be kind of surprising and shocking you. But for 99% of people, there's no way they don't know that. And I just feel like when we see stuff like this happen, we're seeing developers give too much attention and too much oxygen to the trolls, to the 1% of people that literally don't matter and are not at all indicative of the bigger picture. And I hate it when we see that happen, because the more that they do that, like, they're winning, guys. Like, you're literally letting them win. You decided to play their game and now they're winning. And I think that's just crazy when we see that happen, because it happens more and more than ever before due to social media. And yeah, it's just a little strange to me. I just think it's strange that people act like Red Dead Redemption 2 doesn't exist. You know what I mean? It's like people are talking about, these GTA leaks and we have to give an opinion on it. And it's like, you guys are aware that Red Dead Redemption 2 exists, right? Like, have you played Red Dead Redemption 2? Red Dead Redemption 2 is it's truly stunning. Like, it's stunning on a level that only Rockstar can do that. Only Rockstar can do that. And you're sitting here worried about GTA 6 and thinking it's going to look like shit and not impress. Okay. It's very dumb. It's just very dumb. Also, I will say these GTA 6 leaks, they did get me thinking once again about Red Dead Redemption 2. And, I gotta say, man, like, I feel like there's just some games that are sometimes so impressive. You can't soak it all in at first. Like, you have to just kind of walk away from it and come back to it and really just kind of, it takes time to fully grasp everything around it. And I feel like Red Dead Redemption 2 is truly one of those games, really. So, let me see. Pragmatic Hat, you're saying, MBG, I just noticed the new stream format. It makes common sense. Yeah, I just wanted to, again, simplify, put myself on the majority, on pretty much the entirety of the screen, and had the credits roll. Simplicity. Let's see. KD, member for 10 months, you're saying Sony doing timed exclusives is a false equivalency to what Microsoft is doing. Microsoft has been doing the same thing anyways. 2 examples, Contraband and Stalker 2. Well, that's the thing, KD. That's why I'm trying to say, like, false equivalencies are all we see these days. And people people have accepted that if some, like, look, if perception, if something just simply is false, like it's factually untrue, but enough people decide that they don't care about what's true and what's false. They just care that, this is what we say it is. And enough people agree with that. Then what's really the truth at that point? Does the truth even matter? And it's just the same thing that it's always been, man. Perception is reality. And the perception right now is what it is. Therefore, it dictates the reality. For better or for worse, that's just the way it's always been. And likely the way it's always going to be. But yeah, it is worth pointing that out, I think, where people talk about Sony doing all of these exclusivity deals and timed exclusivity deals, and they talk about it as if Microsoft hasn't also done this forever since they've entered the gaming market. It's like, of course they've done it. Like, again, this is where I tried explaining earlier that Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo were all operating on the same playing field, playing by the same rules. And again, like, we are just seeing Microsoft, it's like what you're seeing. It's like, imagine if Microsoft was, like a sports team, and we're seeing these sports teams compete. Microsoft basically just decided that if the way it's always been is we buy new players and we sign on new players, new talent, and this is how we get our edge and our advantage, and we try to compete. Microsoft just decided that we're not just going to buy players anymore. We're just going to buy the entire fucking team, the entire stadium, the whole thing, and that's we don't. And now that's how we're going to compete. And again, it's like that's literally what we're watching. And you know what it. So how many of you guys watch The Boys? How many of you guys watch The Boys? Before I talk about that, I got Dan Becker saying Xbox buying up publishers with Daddy's checkbook. KD, you're saying Call of Duty topic earlier. It's obvious Activision has been trying to make all three COD subseries feel unique in each way. MW equals realistic / tactical. Blops equals classic Treyarch gameplay. Sledgehammer equals COD's arcadey feel. I do agree with that mostly. I think Treyarch, honestly, I think more than Sledgehammer, I think Treyarch still retains that arcadey feel more so. And when I heard that MW2, I don't know if you heard about this or not, KD, but they basically came out and were like, MW2 marks a new era in Call of Duty, and going forward, there's a new mandate where every studio, Treyarch, Sledgehammer, they now have to use that engine. And I'm assuming what that means is Treyarch's next game is going to feel a lot like Modern Warfare 2. Sledgehammer's game already does feel a lot like that. They already did use the same engine, and that makes me feel like, well, all right. You're saying that started with MW 2019. Yeah, that may be true, but I don't know. Not with Treyarch, dude. Not with Treyarch. With Sledgehammer, but Treyarch, if you play Black Ops Cold War, that was not on the same engine, or at least it was a very altered version of the engine. And that's the only question I have is, if I have any hope in the future of Call of Duty for me personally, it's going to come from Treyarch, because Treyarch has always produced my favorite Call of Duties, and I want to. Apparently, their next game is going to come out in 2024. I'll be here to give it a chance and see what they do, but still worried. Josh, you're saying I've been watching you since you switched to PlayStation when Crackdown came out, and it's sad that every reason you left Xbox is still with their main problems. I get what you're saying, Josh, and so look, I now want to ask, how many of you have watched So I saw a lot of you guys answered about watching The Boys. How many of you have seen season 3 and finished season 3 of The Boys? Because there's something I want to talk about that it's a very good analogy, I think, for what we're seeing right now. Okay. All right. So I am going to give a warning right now for anybody who has not seen the latest season of The Boys, season 3. You're going to want to click off the stream, or if you're watching, you're going to want to click off the video, because I'm going to spoil something. But this, to me, is definitely something that I think we can kind of look at. But first of all, The Boys is an incredible show. I absolutely love that show. All right, so here we go. Spoiler territory. So the way I look at what's going on with Sony and Microsoft is pretty much what we see on the show The Boys between Butcher and Homelander, okay? Where, they're both essentially trying to achieve something similar, but in very different ways. And I feel like the big thing with Homelander, for those who don't know about the show, Homelander is basically like he's basically like a Superman type character where he's invincible. He has all these abilities, but his main flaw is he's just a horrible, horrible person, right? Like he has no moral compass and he's just terrible. But he cares very much about his public image. His public image to him is everything. So he's like this garbage person that has Superman powers, but the only thing that stops him from basically losing his shit and destroying everything and everyone and taking over the world is he wants people to love him. He wants people to care about him. Then there's this other character, Butcher, for those who don't know, where he basically, I'm not going to go into all the details, but he got screwed over by Homelander, and he's just a normal human, and he has an axe to grind with Homelander and basically anybody with superpowers. And so his ultimate goal is to try to kill Homelander and to kill all supes, as they call them, superheroes. And it's just so interesting to see what's going on in the gaming industry with Sony and Microsoft, because I really do kind of view it like this, where if you look at Microsoft, they pretty much are like Homelander, where, they try to hide the fact that, like, they don't hide the fact that they're a big, powerful entity, right? Like they have just immense power that is unstoppable just because of how big of a company they are. Yeah, the company Vought, that's pretty much Microsoft. And if you watched season 3 of The Boys, the very end, the very final scene, what happens is, Homelander struggles where he is pissed off, he's angry, he's frustrated, he wants to just destroy and basically just laser anybody that gets in his way or who opposes him, but he doesn't do it because he's afraid of how it's going to make him look. And at the very end of season 3, somebody at one of his rallies, because there's like a Homelander rally, you could imagine it like a bunch of fanboys kind of getting together and pumping up their preferred platform and whatever. Somebody basically calls him out and throws a can of something, and it like hits his son, and he gets like just pissed off, and he just immediately murders the dude. Like he just lasers him right, slices his head clean off in front of everybody publicly on camera and everything else. And he immediately has a look of like, oh shit, like I just messed up. Like I just messed up big. And to his surprise, everybody kind of started cheering him on, where like he just did something absolutely terrible that could have massive negative implications. It does have massive negative implications, and everybody is just like totally okay with it. And you're saying, and Sony's behind the show too. That's so great. And, you know, Homelander was kind of surprised where he's like, yeah, you guys like that. That's right. Yeah, I'm Homelander. I can do whatever I want. And you guys will cheer me on. And it's just so interesting to watch that. And I kind of view what Microsoft's doing right now kind of as that, where it's like, it's just this corporate entity with unlimited power that has never really tapped fully into its power, and it had to kind of play by the rules. And then one day they just decided, we're not doing that anymore. We're gonna just go all in, and people are cheering them on for it. And I feel like Sony in this way is kind of, I don't know. Sony is kind of butcher though in a way, because, you know, to sit here and again pretend that Sony hasn't tried to completely murder Microsoft and just snuff them out entirely from the gaming industry any chance they get. Definitely not the case. So I just, you know, I just recently finished season 3 of The Boys, and I guess I just wanted an excuse to kind of his Nintendo Soldier Boy. yeah, I guess so. I don't. Oh my God, it's so ironic too, because, oh man, Nintendo's supposed to be like the family friendly. If you think about it though, yeah. You're saying so Microsoft is Homelander? I guess so. If you're looking at it the way I am, who's the deep? Yeah, who would be the deep? I don't know. I guess in a way, Activision Blizzard would be the deep. If you really think about it, especially where the show is now. I love that. I love viewing it this way. But yeah, to anybody who hasn't seen show called The Boys, highly recommend it. Just be warned though, it's holy hell. It's on another level of just stuff that happens in that show. Brace yourself. You're not ready. I was not ready, especially for some stuff in season 3. Holy crap. You know, it's funny because I remember seeing Kojima. Kojima came out, and he's a big fan of The Boys, and he even came out and said that he had like an idea or a concept for a game he wanted to make that was like The Boys. And I'm like, you know, I could see that. I very much could see that. So yeah. Well, I think that's pretty much it, guys. It's funny because I said, oh, I'm not going to be able to make this podcast go as long as my other podcasts. And apparently for me, that just translates to, hey, guys, I'm going to end this podcast like 15 or 20 minutes earlier than I normally do. Which, you know, considering we're talking about a 4-hour show here, I guess I kind of got my second wind a little bit, which is good. So, but yeah, I think that's it. I think that's all I really have for you guys at this point. I guess before I go, I'll just ask a general question, just because I'm curious. Well, first of all, before you head out, please hit that like button for me. And I have a super chat here from Himanshu Yadav. You're saying, MBG, do you think there will be a mid-gen refresh of consoles since the new NVIDIA 4000 series is looking up to 5 to 6 times more powerful than these consoles? You know, that's a good question, actually, and I probably should have touched on that when I talked about my topic regarding the discless PS5. Right now, what I will say is I feel like there's a 50-50 chance. I mean, I feel like on one hand, there doesn't seem to be much desire or demand for a mid-gen refresh. In fact, if you mention like a PS5 Pro, a lot of people immediately are like, no thanks. Like we don't need one. And maybe that's true. Maybe people just feel that way right now because this generation has gotten off to such a weird start, and the PS5 is still kind of hard to get your hands on. But I feel like that sentiment could change eventually. Once the PS5 is no longer hard to find, it's, totally ubiquitous, and it's just like everybody can pick one up. And more time goes by, we get further removed from the launch of these consoles. I think it could happen, but I don't know. I still maintain my original thought process, which is I think as long as Sony believes or is ready for Microsoft to do their own mid-gen refresh with the Series X and the Series S, I think as long as Microsoft is planning to do it, which I think they are. I mean, Microsoft seems more inclined to do it with their type of business model. I think Sony will feel the need to match them, and that's kind of my stance on it. So basically, what I mean to say is, if Microsoft is going to do it, then I think Sony's going to do it. If Microsoft did it and Sony decided not to, then I would be surprised. But we do also have to take in, the law of diminishing returns here, where we also have to think about the PlayStation 6. I know it's a ways out, and it's, for some people, it's ridiculous to even think about that, but we do have to consider, what are they planning on doing with the PlayStation 6 to differentiate it from the PS5? And if you do a Pro, it's going to make it even harder to differentiate the PlayStation 6. So if anything, Sony might decide against the PS5 Pro for the sake of the PlayStation 6. And I don't think PlayStation fans would be upset with that. I think a lot of PlayStation fans would actually prefer that. Magnum Visuals, you're saying, is there a Sony/Capcom contract leak that states that the Xbox Series X games will be held back in performance for 7 months? Magnum Visuals, I have never heard of such a thing. I've never heard anybody mention anything like that, so I'm not sure where you're getting that from, or if you're just genuinely curious, it just like popped in your mind. But I don't recall ever hearing anything about Sony making a contract like that. Now, do I think it's completely impossible? No, I don't. Again, this is where I don't want to make it seem like Sony's innocent. If Sony was afraid of a massive performance difference, I absolutely could see Sony, drawing up a contract that basically says, like, you can't, if we sign a marketing deal, you can't make the game perform better. It has to be at parity. I think that would be kind of scummy for sure, but I don't think so. I don't think so, because the thing is, even with games that are not marketed by Sony, you still don't see a massive difference. You're saying you're seeing this on Twitter? I haven't noticed it. I mean, it could be possible, man. I'm not saying it. Sony wouldn't. Again, I actually could see Sony doing something like that. But I think the thing that would surprise me more than anything, if that was a real thing that existed, is the PS5 seems to be holding its own perfectly fine against the Series X, So I don't know why they would feel the need to do that, but we'll see. I'm sure if it's a real thing, we'll find out at some point, but that would be just so weird to me and petty, frankly. But yeah, the question I wanted to leave everybody with before I end this is, I just wanted to get your general take on gaming right now, specifically PlayStation. You can give me your general take on gaming as a whole, but I'm just curious, how do you guys feel right now, the end of September 2022? How do you feel about PlayStation? How are you feeling about them, going into the remainder of this year and going into 2023? Just curious to see what you guys are thinking, how you guys are feeling. But yeah, let me know in the chat, and also let me know in the comments as well. Come back and leave a comment, because I'm going to check them out. But all right, guys, that's going to do it. That's Press X Podcast episode 127 in the books. Yeah, not the most eventful week. Certainly some interesting things to discuss, but we'll see. This last week of September coming up, going into October, I guess we're going to find out. I've seen a lot of people holding out hope that Sony's going to have some type of showcase or something in October. Well, we're right there. So we're going to find out soon enough. And I'll keep the content flowing as best I can throughout the week. So be sure to check out any videos I put out if you're interested in them. And as you're leaving the stream, hit that like button. But that does it. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to my members. We have the Play Has No Limits Plus tier. Big supporters here. Shout out to Junior Jackson, Josh Z, Agile Ice 24, Skin Tight Salmon, RU46, N2 Ray, Whiskey Gaming, Pragmaticat, Hidden Leaf 2 Taka, Nakamichi, D Luffy, Big Norman 0518, Padsy, and PlayStation Pete. We also have Play Has No Limits. Shout out to DG Ad, Rune Gasodin, Space Gambler Jr., Lady K, Black Waifus, Kevin Kahan, John Renzi, Zenarkan Blitzer, JDTV, Josh McGill, Sir Speaks a Lot, Ashorty Faye, Shaky Shako, Tyson Webb 509, Black Manta 1989, and Brandon Chad Perez. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. If your name wasn't read off or didn't show up in the credits, just a heads up. Doesn't mean I missed you. It updates on a monthly basis. So it will be there starting the next podcast. And a big shout out to Devil Shooter, who does the timestamps each week, usually gets them up within the first 24 hours or so of the podcast being out. So if you see Devil Shooter, give him a thank you, give him a shout out. And that does it. That's episode 127 done. But all right, guys, I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I'm going to go chill out, rest up, try to, get fully recovered here. So until next time, guys, take care.